Chapter 1571. The changes in the entire chaotic universe made everyone a little panicked. Many people raised their heads and looked at the sky. The sky was like boiling water that was bubbling, causing everyone's hearts to subconsciously palpitate. What's that? What's going to happen? Many people asked in a panic. The Xiai Divine Emperor stood in front of the magnificent palace, looking at the changes in the sky with an expressionless face. It was a terrible feeling that made all the pores on his body tighten. He had never felt this kind of feeling before. It was not even this strong when the heaven god's tribulation descended. But he knew very well that something was about to happen, could cause a great change in the entire chaotic universe. This could only mean one thing. That was, a heaven god was about to be born, or rather, a heaven god-level expert. But was Soul 13 going to become a heaven god? The Xiai Divine Emperor's pupils constricted, and his expression was a little unfocused. A heaven god? Won't a soul demon be hindered when he becomes a heaven god? There were only 5 heaven god positions, and if a human wanted to become a heaven god, he had to squeeze out one of the old heaven gods. Therefore, it was not difficult for a human to become a heaven god. Even though he had transcended the heaven god tribulation, he was still far from the heaven god realm. The Divine Emperor had always thought that this would never happen, but he never thought that it would actually happen. Soul 13 was going to break through to the heaven god realm. He had always thought that Soul 13's strength was at its peak. The heaven gods won't let him become a heaven god so easily. The Divine Emperor's eyes relaxed. In his heart, he still believed in the heaven gods of this chaotic universe. In the Luo family's skyscraper in the restaurant, Bu Feng was lying in a recliner, looking up at the sky that had changed color. His face was as calm as an ancient well. Yu was sitting on the deck of the netherworld ship, swinging her fair legs. She was also looking up at the sky like Bu Feng. Hades Era, on the other hand, was chatting with her girlfriends in the restaurant. Everything seemed to be going on in an orderly manner. Bu Feng took a deep breath and sat up from the recliner. He sat up from the recliner. He didn't know why, but he felt a little uneasy. He exhaled. Bu Feng narrowed his eyes, then turned around and entered the restaurant. Today's business continued. The capital of the Xiai Divine Dynasty, in a luxurious courtyard. Imo raised her head, and there seemed to be ripples in her eyes as she stared at the sky. The despair in her heart continued to spread. The soul demons are about to attack again. I wonder if the Xiai Divine Dynasty can stop them. The immortal Spirit Empress said that, "Your Highness is the only hope for mankind." Imo clenched her fists, and a determined look appeared in her eyes. She stood up and walked in the direction of the restaurant. She had found out that the Lord of the Divine Chef Temple was Bu Feng. In order to maximize Crown's natural talent, he had to obtain the 7-colored fruit of law. Only then would Crown be able to comprehend 5 supreme laws of the universe, become a peerless genius, and save the human race from its predicament. Regardless of whether that chef agrees or not, I must find a way to make him agree. Amo's eyes were sharp. She left the house and flew toward Bu Feng's restaurant. In the immortal Spirit Divine Dynasty, Soul 13 stood where he was. In front of him, Lord Phoenix, who had turned into a soul demon, was shivering in the black ball. The Empress's divine sense was struggling as well, but she could not break free from Soul 13's grasp. Soul 13's eyes narrowed as if he was thinking. Suddenly Soul 13's eyes moved, and his hand, which was holding the Empress, slowly rose. The space between his brows cracked, revealing a slit. The Empress of the Immortal Spirit Empress kept struggling, but Soul 13 pressed his hand between her eyebrows and sent it into the crack. Buzz, as soon as the Empress's body entered the slit. The next moment, the aura around Soul 13 began to churn and boil. All of a sudden, it began to surge violently. The corner of his mouth twitched, and the little bit of darkness that remained on his insect scales disappeared completely. There was a flash of light. It was as if a layer of mercury had been poured over him. Soul 13 had completely turned silver. Boom! A deafening rumble rang out in the sky. A bolt of lightning as thick as an arm exploded in the sky. Then, with a rumble, it smashed down toward the imperial palace of the immortal spirit divine dynasty. Soul 13's pupils constricted. He burst out laughing. His laughter seemed to have a strange charm as it spread out and reached the ears of every soul demon. These soul demons became excited at once. They waved their fists and roared excitedly. Their insect scales spread open and spewed out streams of dark air. The scene they had been looking forward to for a long time was finally about to happen. Soul 13 was going to break through to become a soul overlord. Boom! Lightning kept falling. Soul 13's brows glowed. He spread his arms, and the insect's scales on his body glowed with silver light. Bathed in the lightning, he felt very comfortable. He even felt so comfortable that he wanted to moan. This was the will of the universe of this chaotic universe. To become a soul overlord, one must alarm the will of the universe. However, Soul 13 was very confident that he would win. He was not afraid at all, even if the so-called punishment was extremely terrible. Boom! The lightning bolts fell. Each of them contained terrifying power, comparable to a full-force blow from a high-grade god king. However, when these attacks fell on Soul 13, they did not cause him the slightest damage. The defense of the silver insect scales was too strong. He closed his scarlet eyes and began to comprehend the most profound mystery. It was not so easy to become a soul overlord. It was just like how there was a limit to the number of heaven gods in this chaotic universe. There was also a limit to the number of soul overlords. Moreover, to become a soul overlord, one needed the sin mandate blessed by the soul god. If he wanted to become a soul overlord, he must have the sin mandate. Only in this way could he rightfully become a soul overlord. If he were in the chaotic universe where the soul demons came from, it might be difficult for him to succeed. However, the sin mandate, one of the 7 sins in this chaotic universe, had never been occupied by a soul demon. Therefore, it was very easy for him to become a soul overlord. Boom! The power of the lightning bolts grew stronger and stronger. Soul 13 had been very vigilant. Ever since he learned that there were heaven gods in this world who were not weaker than soul overlords, he had been very wretched. Except for that time when he attacked that stinky chef, he had been growing wretchedly. He tried his best not to attract the attention of those heaven gods. Although heaven gods had never appeared before, it did not stop him from being afraid of them. If he wanted to become a soul overlord, he needed to know how to follow his heart. Sizzle, the entire imperial palace of the immortal spirit divine dynasty seemed to be turning into a sea of lightning. In the sea of lightning, Soul 13 felt that his strength was constantly increasing. Compared to before, he was much stronger. It was a change in the constitution of a soul demon. His soul demon will had merged perfectly with his fleshly body. Rumble, the lightning disappeared. All the soul demons in the surroundings stared at him with fanaticism. Soul 13 spread his silver wings. The moment they spread, they seemed to envelop the whole universe. Soul 13's eyes turned scarlet. His will spread out. Buzz, he murmured something under his breath, his tone respectful and his language profound. As he recited, a pious aura emanated from his body. Then, the surrounding soul demons knelt on the ground. They watched respectfully as Soul 13's body changed. One after another, black energy balls emerged around Soul 13. The black energy ball represented the power of the origin. This kind of power seemed to be extracted from the universe itself. It did not belong to this world, but it was subservient to it. Soul 13 opened his eyes, grinned, and looked at the 7 balls of black energy hovering around him. How he wished he could devour all of them. Unfortunately, he could not do it. They were the power of the 7 sins, and he could only absorb one of them. Moreover, he could only become a soul overlord with this one. He could not touch the rest. The sin of greed was something he could not bear. Soul 13 did not hesitate for long. He raised his hand and stretched it out suddenly. Buzz, his hand grabbed a ball of black energy. The energy swirled, slowly dissipated, and immediately poured into Soul 13's body. Then, it burrowed into every pore in his body. And then, a vertical eye gradually took shape between Soul 13's eyebrows. The vertical eye swiveled, and a majestic sin seemed to burst out of it. The 7 sins are arrogance, jealousy, rage, sloth, greed, gluttony, and lust. Each of them can lead to the position of Soul Overlord, and Soul 13's eyes widened. The next moment, his mouth began to change at a speed visible to the naked eye. It slowly grew larger, and his mouth seemed to have turned into a bottomless pit. A terrible sense of hunger swallowed him in an instant. Soul 13 will become a Soul Overlord of gluttony. Rumble. The sky changed colors. The restaurant was closed for the day. Looking at the growing turnover, Bufang did not relax at all. An inexplicable worry lingered in his heart. He furrowed his brows. Bufang breathed a sigh of relief. He took a step, clasped his hands behind his back, and left the restaurant. This time, he quietly went to the place where the ancient heaven god had sealed the soul demon. Heaven gods were the supreme experts of this chaotic universe. Logically speaking, with the soul demons wreaking havoc like this, it was impossible for them not to appear. Did they not care about the lives of the living beings in the chaotic universe? With the strength of a heaven god, the appearance of any one of them was enough to wipe out the soul demon disaster. But no heaven god had appeared. Bufang was just a chef. But everyone was responsible for the rise and fall of the world. As a chef, it was necessary for him to care about the world's affairs. He looked at the fruit of law in the heaven god's seal. Bufang's pupils constricted in an instant. He felt that something was unusual. Are the heaven gods restrained from making a move, or are they deliberately not making a move? Restrained from making a move? Bufang twitched the corner of his mouth. When the heaven god slapped him, he was very pleased with the slap. Why is that? Frowning, Bufang took a step forward and stepped into the seal. Rumble, the seal swirled. In the great netherworld, a towering tree with swaying branches towered into the clouds and looked as if it could strike the stars hung in the sky. On the branch, there was a figure sitting upright. The figure sat on it, swinging his legs as he stared into the depths of the chaosverse. Slurp, murky yellow wine was poured into a cup. The man, who was as beautiful as a woman, slowly poured the wine into his mouth. Tsk, tisk, good wine. Mu Hongzi toyed with the wine jar in his hand. The wine and the jar collided with each other and made a clattering sound. He took a deep breath and exhaled a breath that reeked of alcohol. It looks like it's about to begin. I wonder if that boy, Bufang, can survive this calamity. There's nothing he can do if he can't. At the very least, it'll be another reincarnation. Mu Hongzi smiled. His beautiful face bloomed like a flower, dimming the starry sky a little. Don't you think so? Many treasures? Mu Hongzi said. The heaven tree beneath him swayed gently as if it was responding to him. Its leaves rustled and rubbed against each other. Chapter 1572. In the capital of the Xiaoyi divine dynasty, heaven and earth had returned to normal. However, a formless oppressive might enveloped everyone's hearts. The divine emperor stayed in the palace, feeling a little restless. From time to time, he flipped through the memorials, stood up, and paced back and forth in the palace. As the ruler of a dynasty, he was under tremendous pressure. Outside, it was late at night and a bright moon hung in the sky. However, the bright moon, which usually looked like a golden jade plate, was now covered with a layer of blood, which looked very strange. The divine emperor sighed. He changed into a set of ordinary clothes, stepped out, and flew out of the palace. Walking in the void and looking down from above, The capital of the divine dynasty was brightly lit and prosperous. However, no one knew how long this prosperity would last. Towering skyscrapers rose from the ground, filling the capital with an oppressive shock. The divine emperor drifted over and landed in front of the Luo family's skyscraper. He wanted to go to Bufang's restaurant and eat something delicious. When people were under great pressure, perhaps only eating was the best way to ease their anxiety. However, the divine emperor had forgotten that Bufang's restaurant was not open at night. So, looking at the closed door, the divine emperor felt more and more depressed. He just wanted to eat something. He took a deep breath and knocked on the restaurant's door. However, it was not Bufang who came to open the door. Bufang was not here, and the divine emperor had no desire to eat. Under Yu's suspicious gaze, the divine emperor put his hands behind his back and walked away. His back was hunched, and he seemed to have aged a lot. If Bufang is not in the restaurant, where could he be? The divine emperor's mind flickered. Suddenly, his eyes narrowed. As a god emperor, the power of his divine sense was extremely strong. A thought flashed through Zhang Xian's mind. The divine emperor looked in the direction of the divine chef temple. The fluctuation coming from the air there was somewhat different. The wrinkles on the divine emperor's face seemed to move. He took a step forward, tore the void, and disappeared in a flash. In the divine chef temple, the void was torn apart, and the divine emperor walked out of it. Below it was the forbidden land of the ancient heaven gods. That strange fluctuation was coming from here. Could it be that someone was trying to break into the ancient heaven god's seal in the middle of the night? Ever since Bufang broke the third seal, Summer had ordered that divine chefs were not allowed to continue breaking the seal. Could it be that someone dared to disobey Summer's orders? In the divine chef temple, Summer's orders were still useful. The divine emperor put his hands behind his back. He was a little curious. Suddenly, his gaze froze. Looking down, Zhang Xian's breathing halted. That was because he discovered that one of the two remaining layers of the inheritance seal had actually been broken by someone. Buzz. No one knew when Summer would appear. She gave the divine emperor a strange look. He was busy every day, and yet he came to the divine chef temple in the middle of the night. Shoo, when the divine emperor saw Summer, he suppressed the surprise in his heart and raised his index finger at her. Xia Chen was stunned for a moment, then turned his head to look at the sealed area, his heart also becoming excited. In the whole divine dynasty, perhaps only Bufang could break the seal. Could it be that Bufang intended to completely break the seal? Bufang's face was indifferent. In front of him, a dish slowly floated up, flashing brilliantly. To break the remaining two seals, he needed to use the divine power he had comprehended in the previous seals, combining them with cooking skills. It was very difficult, and it took Bufang a lot of time to break it. However, compared to the previous tests, the remaining two seals weren't that difficult for him. It was not only because Bufang's divine sense was stronger. It was also because Bufang's cooking skills were very strong, so cooking was easier than those torturous tests. He gently raised his hand and pushed. A crack rang out. The membrane-like seal was broken. Buzz, a gust of wind blew over and swept across the whole place. The wind stirred Bufang's hair, causing it to flutter in the wind. A rich fruity aroma wafted over and lingered in Bufang's mouth and nose, making Bufang's eyes narrow. It smells so good, that gave Bufang pause. I can't believe the aroma of this fruit of law is so strong. Bufang was a little surprised. He walked up to the seven-colored fruit of law, reached out a hand, and grabbed it. Buzz, a strange fluctuation spread through Bufang's body in an instant. It was as if someone was spying on him. Holding the fruit in his hand, Bufang glanced around in confusion. He was sure that he had felt someone was watching him just now. However, he could no longer feel that feeling now. Bufang looked down at the fruit and found that it seemed to be full of temptation. Swish! A noise rang out. Summer and the Divine Emperor landed at the same time and appeared at his side. They glanced at the interior of the seal. This ancient heaven god seal had been in the Divine Chef Temple for a long time. They had been curious about what was inside. Apart from the fruit of law, the interior was not narrow. The space was spacious, but there were many things on display, including a lot of books and some strange things. Summer's curiosity had long been aroused, and she was moving around in it, touching things here and there. The Divine Emperor, on the other hand, was very steady. With just a glance, he knew what was going on. The most precious thing in the whole space was the fruit of law. The Divine Emperor also understood that it could cultivate the talents of the younger generation, so it was naturally very important. Bufang did not feel the feeling of being watched, so he did not mind. Holding the fruit, he looked at the Divine Emperor and Summer. "I didn't expect you to break the seal without a sound." The Divine Emperor sighed with emotion. Looking at the fruit in Bufang's hand, he was a little envious. Unfortunately, he was too old, and it would be a waste if he gave it to him. Bufang chatted with Summer and the Divine Emperor for a while. As for the other things in the seal, Bufang had no intention of taking them away. Except for the fruit of law, these things were useless to him. Summer and the Divine Emperor accepted them without hesitation. The three of them packed up everything and were about to leave. The three of them soared into the sky and walked across the void. Bufang planned to return to the restaurant, swallow the fruit of law, and comprehend the fifth supreme law of the universe. That way, he would have perfected all 5 supreme laws. Buzz, however, just as Bufang soared into the sky, a figure suddenly shot up. And a terrifying aura filled the air. He actually blocked Bufang's path. The Divine Emperor and Summer furrowed their brows, looking at the figure blocking their way in confusion. Through the blood-colored moonlight they saw the newcomer. It was Imo from the immortal spirit divine dynasty. The fruit of law. Imo pursed her lips and looked at the fruit in Bufang's hand. The Divine Emperor frowned slightly. He did not expect that Imo had not given up yet. The Empress said that Her Highness is the hope of mankind. "I hope your Majesty can fulfill her wish and give the fruit of law to Her Highness," Imo said, breathing rapidly as she stared at the fruit in Bufang's hand. Bufang frowned. "Her Highness has comprehended 4 supreme laws of the universe and is extremely talented. Please, wait." Imo still wanted to speak. However, she was interrupted by Bufang, his face expressionless. Imo paused and looked at Bufang in confusion. "You want the fruit of law? For your Her Highness? Why?" Bufang asked. "Her Highness has comprehended 4 supreme laws of the universe," Imo said. "Then I got the fruit of law. Why should I give it to her?" "I've also comprehended 4 supreme laws of the universe," Bufang said. Imo frowned. "But the Empress said Her Highness is the hope of mankind. Do you want to kill the hope of mankind?" Bufang shook his head. In the distance, the Divine Emperor's expression changed as well, and there was a hint of anger in his eyes. If only Imo had a little bit of their Her Highness's tact. The Empress said she's the hope of all mankind? The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched slightly as he glanced at Imo. "I know Xiao Yinyu's character. She's not suitable to be the hope of all mankind," Bufang said. Imo still wanted to refute. However, Bufang interrupted her mercilessly. Holding the fruit of law, Bufang no longer gave Imo a friendly look. Suddenly, his aura exploded out. One by one, wheels of law emerged over his head. Every time one appeared, Imo felt the pressure on her increase a little. "What hope of all mankind? That's just your excuse. You're just using it for your own good. Have you ever thought about what Xiao Yinyu wants? Does she care about the hope of all mankind? What are you afraid of? You should know very well that even if Xiao Yinyu comprehended 5 supreme laws, what's the use? You're just trying to increase the burden on Xiao Yinyu. You want the Shui divine dynasty to protect her and you because you're afraid of facing the soul demons, Bu Fang said coldly. Every time he said it, the pressure made Imo tremble all over. Bu Fang's aura kept rising, and the four wheels of law burst into dazzling light. Imo froze as she watched. Bu Fang's aura was much stronger than that of the crown princess. Both of them had comprehended four supreme laws of the universe, but the difference between them was like heaven and earth. The divine emperor watched from a distance with a cold face and did not say anything. Imo opened her mouth. She still wanted to speak. She was a little flustered. However, Bu Fang did not give her a chance to speak. Like a heaven god, Bu Fang stood in the sky with his hands clasped behind his back, and his aura changed. Imo, a high-grade god king, was smashed down from the sky by the pressure. She sat down on the ground. She looked at Bu Fang in disbelief. Why is this demigod so fierce? Bu Fang paid no more attention to Imo. He took a step forward and tore through the sky like a meteor, flying into the distance in a flash and landing in the restaurant. The divine emperor looked at Imo. If it were not for the sake of the empress, he would not have even sent the golden armor guards to save them. The hope of all mankind who almost died at the hands of the soul demons, ridiculous. The real hope of all mankind should be like Bu Fang. A bowl of stinky tofu had killed countless soul demons. Bu Fang landed in the restaurant. He held the fruit of law in his hand, and a strong aroma of fruit wafted over. Bu Fang entered the restaurant and closed the door. The divine emperor and Summer also landed outside, their eyes fixed on him. Bu Fang was a demigod, so he still had a chance to build his foundation. Once he ate the fruit of law, he could comprehend one supreme law of the universe. Was Bu Fang really going to become the first person in history to comprehend 5 supreme laws? They had to wait for the birth of a miracle. Outside the Shui divine dynasty's capital, a war was going on. It was between the soul demons and the humans. The humans and the soul demons had been confronting each other. Suddenly, a beam of silver light flew across the boundless starry sky. It was a great world that belonged to the Shui divine dynasty. This great world was the Shui divine dynasty's defensive line. Once it was defeated, the Shui divine dynasty would not be able to resist the full-scale attack of the soul demons. The great world was already full of the Shui divine dynasty's guards and experts. Suddenly they saw a beam of light in the sky. The silver light flashed. In an instant, countless soul demons spread out in the sky. These soul demons all had greedy looks on their faces as they stared at the group of humans down below, drooling. Drip, drip. Saliva dripped down from their mouth. The pupils of a high-grade god king stationed in the great world constricted. He roared. Enemy attack! The whole great world seemed to come back to life in an instant. Soul 13's mouth grew much wider, and there seemed to be a boundless starry sky swirling in it. Facing the group of human experts down below, he sneered. He was so hungry. Opening his mouth wide, he sucked in a sharp breath. Rumble! A terrible hurricane broke out in an instant. At this moment, the whole great world collapsed, sending sand and stones flying everywhere. One figure after another was devoured by Soul 13 and fell into the bottomless world in his mouth. Chapter 1573. The Divine Emperor did not get the news that Bu Fang had comprehended the 5th supreme law of the universe. Instead, before dawn, a divine dynasty's expert rushed over with a panicked look on his face. The faces of the experts were filled with nervousness and anxiety. What's wrong? The divine emperor frowned and looked at him. Your Majesty, the great world at the front line has fallen. It was broken by the soul demons. The army of soul demons is like a pack of wolves and tigers, and they are now marching toward the capital of the Shui divine dynasty. The minister said in a panic. He was truly a little frightened, mainly because he hadn't reacted to the news when it came to him. With Bu Fang's stinky tofu, The front line had always been in an advantageous position against the soul demons. However, he did not expect that the front line would fall in less than one night. The few high-grade god kings guarding the front line had all fallen. This was not good news for the Xiaoyi divine dynasty. The divine emperor's expression changed dramatically. He could no longer wait for Bufang to comprehend the fifth supreme law of the universe. With a serious face, he flew toward the capital with the minister. At the same time, he ordered the aristocratic families and ministers to hold a meeting. The news could not be kept a secret. All the aristocratic families and ministers in the capital learned about it. They all rushed to the palace. After a short discussion, they formed an army and rushed to the front line. The aristocratic families were in a state of panic. The soul demons suddenly became tough and suppressed the Xiaoyi divine dynasty's army. What was going on? Could it have something to do with the strange phenomenon of heaven and earth? Everyone sucked in a deep breath as they felt the pressure bearing down on them. In the Luo family's skyscraper, Summer leaned against the railing on the top floor of the skyscraper, staring at the restaurant with its door closed. She had heard what the minister and the divine emperor had said just now. But she never thought that the situation had become so serious. She did not know if Bufang could really comprehend the fifth supreme law of the universe after eating the fruit of law. After all, she did not know if there would be a saturation of supreme laws, and if one comprehended too much, it would be impossible to continue comprehending them. But no matter what, she could only pin her hopes on Bufang now. Although he didn't understand why he was pinning his hopes on Bufang, he felt that pinning his hopes on Bufang shouldn't be wrong. Because Bufang had created too many miracles so far. Although he was only a demigod. In the restaurant, Bufang pulled out a chair and sat on it. He looked at the rainbow-colored fruit in front of him. He felt that this fruit was a little strange, but, no matter how strange it was, he still had to eat it. It was not easy to gather all 5 supreme laws of the universe, waiting for the system's reward to provide fruit of law. This was a feasible method, but Bufang didn't know if the system would give him a temporary quest with a fruit of law. Even if there was, he didn't know how long he would have to wait, so he didn't want to gamble. Yu, Hades Era, and the others sat far away, craning their necks to look at Bufang. Little Hu narrowed his eyes, his nose twitching, and saliva dripping from his little mouth. However, it was impossible for Bufang to give the fruit of law to Little Hu. Lord Go was lying under the Path Understanding tree, snoring and not moving at all. Lord Dog seemed to have become even fatter. The meat around his body seemed to have piled up to the point that it didn't even exist. Bufang grabbed the rainbow-colored fruit of law. The familiar aura made Bufang understand that this fruit of law should be born in the chaotic sea of laws. Bufang's hand shook, and the dragon bone kitchen knife fell into his grasp. The kitchen knife gently slid across the surface of the fruit. Immediately, the skin of the fruit split open, and a thick juice flowed out of it. The juice splashed, exuding a rich aroma. Bufang took a deep breath, and the rich aroma went into his mouth and nose. It was the familiar taste of the fruit of law. He had eaten so many fruits of law that he had gotten used to this smell. Taking a deep breath, the flesh and juice of the fruit rushed into Bufang's mouth. A thick feeling enveloped Bufang's tongue. In a flash, Bufang's consciousness was pulled into a strange world. Dots of light twinkled like stars. Without a doubt, this was the Sea of Laws. Bufang came to the depths of the Sea of Laws with ease. He still had one law of time that he hadn't comprehended yet. If he could gather it, he would be able to gather all 5 supreme laws of the universe. As soon as Bufang arrived, the last ultimate law immediately turned into a ray of light that enveloped his body. It was as if it was welcoming him. Bufang didn't even move, but the latter directly got into his body. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. He had come here so many times that the power of the law had become familiar with him. He had absorbed the law of time. However, Bufang didn't immediately withdraw from the Sea of Laws. Looking around, Bufang exhaled. The Sea of Laws gave him a strange and mysterious feeling. It was as if the power of the laws had been kept here. It was a strange feeling. However, Bufang didn't think too much about it. Buzz, suddenly, a white light bloomed in front of him. The next moment, he opened his eyes, and everything became clear. After comprehending the last law, Bufang didn't even have a phenomenon appear. Obviously, he had comprehended too much, so he didn't want a phenomenon to appear. Bufang had a strange look on his face. He cracked his neck, but his expression didn't change at all. This meant that he had comprehended 5 supreme laws of the universe. It didn't seem any different from before. Bufang raised his hand. A hazy aura lingered in his hand. It was the power of the law of time. Everything in his hand seemed to have become slightly slower. The law of time is amazing. Bufang narrowed his eyes. Controlling time was the dream of many people. Now, he could control time. Although it was only a preliminary control, it was a strange and exciting experience. The law of time was what the Lord Go comprehended. Lying under the path understanding tree, the Lord Go opened his eyes, his head shrinking into a ball of flesh. He squinted at the law of time in Bufang's hand. He snorted and turned his head away, his whole body trembling. The trembling made everyone's hearts tremble. Obviously, the Lord Go didn't care about the law of time in Bufang's hand. Bufang didn't feel embarrassed. It was better than nothing. However, he felt a little confused. Collecting 7 pearls could summon the dragon god. He had gone through so much trouble to collect 5 supreme laws of the universe, so why didn't he get anything? After waiting for a long time, nothing special happened. Bufang also breathed a sigh of relief. The system didn't even make a fart. Bufang twitched his mouth, rolled up his sleeves, turned, and stepped into the kitchen, ready to start cooking. Summer waited in front of the restaurant for a long time. A strange fluctuation spread from Bufang's comprehension of the law. Although it was not strong, she could still catch it. Why is the phenomenon so inconspicuous? Did Bufang fail to comprehend it? Summer furrowed her brows. She wanted to ask, but after thinking about it, she gave up. Perhaps Bufang was feeling sad because he didn't comprehend the supreme law. Boom! Boom! The soul demon's attack was too strong. It was beyond everyone's imagination. In the Xiai divine dynasty's capital, one warship after another soared into the starry sky and headed for the front line. However, the front line had been shrinking. The warships of the experts of the aristocratic families arrived at the battlefield. They were all staring blankly at what was happening in front of them. Over there, the great world was collapsing. It was collapsing continuously. The soul demons were charging and killing unscrupulously. The divine dynasty's army was fighting the soul demons, but they were putting up a desperate fight. A silver soul demon was too dazzling to the eyes. Floating there, it was like a blazing sun, dazzling and eye-catching. However, the aura of such blazing light could not be sensed at all. No one thought this silver soul demon was harmless. When a top high-grade god king was slapped to death by this silver soul demon, the experts of the aristocratic families on the warships all sucked in their breaths. The army began to collapse. Before the experts of the aristocratic families could even attack, they were routed along with the army. In the capital of the Xiai divine dynasty, the divine emperor stood in the palace. Behind him, all the officials bowed and stood with a look of shock on their faces. The sky there was rumbling. There were roars of fire constantly surging, and the sound of explosions was like rolling thunder. The people of the divine dynasty had been arranged to evacuate. Everyone was very serious. The situation was not optimistic. Were the soul demons about to reach the Xiai divine dynasty's capital? The skin on the divine emperor's old face was twitching. Why are the soul demons so aggressive? Is it really as I guessed? Has Soul 13 achieved the power of a heaven god? But Is it so easy to break through to the heaven god level? The divine emperor's eyes were filled with vicissitudes. He ordered a eunuch to bring his armor. The eunuch left. Before long, several eunuchs came respectfully with the golden armor. Clad in a military uniform, the divine emperor clenched his fists and exuded a towering aura. What will come will come. The sun shone down. Bufang pushed open the door of the restaurant. The atmosphere in the divine dynasty's capital today seemed a little different from what he had imagined. Bufang couldn't help but furrow his brows. What happened? The people lining up outside the restaurant had all disappeared. It was more or less the same to describe his current situation. Is no one eating today? Bufang exhaled. The power brought by the soul demons has become so severe? Bufang furrowed his brows. With his hands clasped behind his back, Bufang stood at the top of the Luo family's skyscraper. Looking down from the top, he could see the army below. Everyone raised their heads grimly and looked up at the sky, where explosions and rumbles kept ringing out. Bufang followed his gaze. There, flames were surging. Their grim aura was so oppressive that it made it hard for people to breathe. Through the dense clouds, they could see the soul demons roaring, blotting out the sky. Bufang exhaled. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps rang out, giving Bufang pause. Are there still people coming to eat today? Over there, a figure slowly walked over. Looking at the figure, Bufang raised his brows. He was clad in golden armor and a bright red cloak. His pale hair hung loosely over his shoulders, and his wrinkled face had a faint look of seriousness. Straightening his back, he walked over, nodded at Bufang, and stepped into the restaurant. Owner Bu, are you still open today? The divine emperor asked. Bufang came to his senses and nodded with an expressionless face. The crown prince did not come to work as a waiter today, and he was not in the mood to do so. So, you had to temporarily act as a waiter. What would you like to eat? You was dressed in a long black dress. She looked elegant and beautiful, and her voice was cold. The divine emperor turned his head and glanced at the menu behind him. Then, his eyes swept over it. There were many dishes, but he did not order them. Suddenly, the divine emperor looked at the first dish on the menu. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly. I'll have a bowl of egg-fried rice. You paused. Since the restaurant became popular, very few people had egg-fried rice. Why did the divine emperor come to the restaurant at this time and order a bowl of egg-fried rice? I don't need the enhanced version. I'll have the simplest egg-fried rice. The divine emperor chuckled like a simple old man. You told Bufang the name of the dish. Bufang was also stunned. Taking a deep look at the divine emperor, who was waiting at the table, Bufang turned and went into the kitchen. Washing the pot, beating the eggs, fetching the rice, Bufang did it meticulously. He heated the pot, lit the fire, added the oil sizzle in the kitchen. A strong aroma wafted out, filling Bufang's mouth and nose. This familiar smell made Bufang a little dazed. Egg-fried rice. That was the dish that opened his cooking path. He tossed the wok. A ladle filled with egg-fried rice. The egg-fried rice was covered in a blue and white porcelain bowl. The egg was half-cooked, and it seemed to be shredded, flowing slowly. This was Bufang's special egg-fried rice. The strong aroma of the egg filled the air, causing Bufang's heart to flutter. Carrying the bowl of egg-fried rice, Bufang walked out of the kitchen. He placed the dish in front of the divine emperor. Thank you. The divine emperor glanced at Bufang and said. He did not mention anything about the soul demons, nor did he ask if Bufang had comprehended the fifth supreme law of the universe. He just took out a blue and white porcelain spoon, slowly scooped up the egg-fried rice, and put it into his mouth. One mouthful after another, the fragrant egg-fried rice entered his mouth, and the divine emperor chewed unhurriedly. The wrinkles on his wrinkled face seemed to dance. Finally, the last spoonful of egg-fried rice was finished. The divine emperor breathed a sigh of relief. He stood up, took out a source stone, and paid. Then, he turned and walked down the stairs. After eating a bowl of Mr. Boo's egg-fried rice, I feel my whole body is full of energy. Even a simple bowl of rice can be so delicious. I really hope more people can eat Owner Boo's food, and I hope this is not the last bowl of egg-fried rice. The Divine Emperor sighed. Without looking back, he straightened his back, slowly walked out, and disappeared from the top floor of the Luo family's skyscraper. After the Divine Emperor disappeared, the roars of an army rang out from down below. It was a cry of defiance to fate. In the sky, a rumbling sound echoed out. The sky was torn apart. A beam of silver light tore through everything in an instant, blooming brilliance, and fell from the sky. A terrible aura descended in an instant. The army, which had been shouting hoarsely, came to an abrupt halt. Hee Soul 13's cold laughter lingered in the air, sending chills down everyone's spine. The Gluttony Demon Lord was the ruler of the soul demons. Finally, he had arrived. Bufang slowly put away a source stone in his hand. He also sensed Soul 13's aura, and his face suddenly became very serious. However, the moment he put away the source stone, the system's serious voice rang out in Bufang's mind. Chapter 1574. The system's serious voice rang out in Bufang's head. It lingered in Bufang's ears in an instant, causing Bufang to narrow his eyes and hold his breath. Congratulations to the host for completing the turnover task. You are qualified for promotion. Do you want to promote? The system asked. At this moment, the system's voice was so pleasant to Bufang's ears. The turnover task was completed. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched involuntarily. He felt that it was quite dramatic. He could not believe that he had made a breakthrough in his turnover task because of the source stone from the Xiaoyi Divine Emperor's bowl of egg-fried rice. Did Bufang look like someone who was short of that source stone? As it turned out, he really was. Rubbing his wrist, Bufang thought of something. He chose yes. Buzz, the next moment, the system's voice rang out in his head again. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the promotion qualification. The promotion begins now. Rumble. Bufang sat quietly in the chair, his face calm and unchanging as he breathed a sigh of relief. Lying under the Path Understanding tree, the Lord Go narrowed his eyes and glanced at Bufang. Then, he lowered his head and went back to sleep. Yu, on the other hand, sat quietly at the side, blinking her big eyes and looking at Bufang. She could feel that Bufang's body seemed to be undergoing some kind of transformation. That kind of metamorphosis made her wary. She stood up and quietly closed the restaurant's door. Under the skyscraper, battle cries shook the sky. The Xiaoyi Divine Emperor was clad in golden armor. His aura was magnificent, and his eyes were bursting with dazzling light. Behind him was the Xiaoyi Divine Dynasty's army, each of whom was bursting with mighty divine power. As representatives of the Xiaoyi Divine Dynasty, they raised their heads fearlessly and followed behind the Divine Emperor to face the soul demons in the sky. Rumble. The sky was changing colors. Silver light tore through the sky like a blazing sun, dazzling and blinding, causing countless people to feel a stinging pain in their eyes. The rumbling explosion was as dazzling as fireworks, blotting out the sky. The experts of the Divine Dynasty all took a deep breath. The army of soul demons was bearing down on them, and their terrible aura made everyone a little breathless. The calamity of the soul demons was the most terrible disaster the chaotic universe had ever encountered. Perhaps in ancient times there had been even more terrifying disasters. However, this disaster had caused countless people to feel despair. The Divine Emperor knew that these soul demons were not creatures of this chaotic universe, but invaders. But the Divine Emperor was very unwilling to let the invaders occupy their world. So he had to rise up and fight back. Of the three divine dynasties, only the Xiaoyi Divine Dynasty was left. Perhaps in everyone's opinion, The quick destruction of the Titan Divine Dynasty and the Immortal Spirit Divine Dynasty made people think that the Divine Dynasties were incompetent. In fact, the Xiai Divine Emperor knew that every person and expert of the Divine Dynasty had fought hard. Sol 13's whole body was silvery white, and he looked like a star that was blooming with dazzling light. The figures around him seemed to twist and distort as he hovered there in midair. It was almost as though he had detached himself from the Chaosverse, an existence in the Heaven God realm. When the Xiai Divine Emperor sensed the unfathomable aura in Sol 13, his face darkened, and he felt a wave of despair. Yes, it was despair. Sol 13 had really broken through and become an existence in the Heaven God realm. At that moment, the Divine Emperor even felt a little jealousy in his heart. Yes, why could these invaders break through so easily, while it was so difficult for them, the humans who originally lived in this chaotic universe, to break through and become heaven gods? The Divine Emperor was very unwilling. The most important point was, the humans of this original universe were about to be wiped out by the soul demons, but the lofty heaven gods were still indifferent. Were they going to see this universe occupied by the soul demons with their own eyes? The Divine Emperor was unwilling. So he had to fight back. Even though his body was old and he was struggling at death's door, he still had to fight back. He and all the people in the chaotic universe would not yield to fate. Fight! The Xiai Divine Emperor's armor burst into a dazzling golden light as he tried to fight Sol 13's aura. Sol 13 hovered in midair. His scarlet eyes narrowed slightly as he glanced at the crowd. After breaking through to the Soul Overlord realm, he felt that victory was in his grasp. There seemed to be explosive power in his body, and even a drop of his divine power was enough to crush the void. He was really too strong now. However, he was strong and hungry. The 7 sins were the foundation of the soul demons. In the soul demon universe, the gluttony soul overlord was a very terrifying existence. And now, Sol 13, had become the legendary gluttony demon lord. He wanted to eat up this chaotic universe. He wanted to enslave all the humans in this chaotic universe. Sol 13's mouth fell open. He smacked his tongue. A scarlet tongue fell down. The tongue was extremely long and narrow. Moreover, it was covered in hair-raising barbs. His eyes were filled with a cold gleam. On his forehead there was an eyeball rolling. Suddenly, Sol 13 fixed his eyes on the humans down below and laughed coldly. Foolish humans! This soul overlord is equivalent to your heaven god. Give up resisting. You are no match for this soul overlord, he said. His eyes were strange. They were fixed in front of the Divine Emperor. You humans, submit to me obediently, and I can spare your lives, and make sure you don't have to worry about food and clothing, Sol 13 said. His voice rang in everyone's ears like a great bell. At this moment, victory was in his grasp, but he did not want to exterminate the human race, even though he was very, very hungry. What he needed to do was to keep these humans in captivity. He did not want to repeat the situation in the soul demon universe. If a single human died, the soul demons would lose their delicious food. For the gluttony soul overlord, this was simply torture. Although he was gluttonous, he had to learn to restrain himself. Submit? The Divine Emperor sneered. They would not submit to any soul demon. Rumble! The Xiai Divine Emperor focused his eyes, stepped into the air, and rushed straight into the sky. He clenched his fists, and the divine power in him began to surge like waves. His aura kept rising, and the sky changed colors. Many soul demons narrowed their eyes, somewhat wary and fearful. At this moment, the Xiai Divine Emperor looked like a real peerless expert. It was as if there was a flame burning in his eyes. The Xiai Divine Emperor's old face began to look younger, and his white hair swayed and turned into black hair. Divine Emperor Fist! The Xiai Divine Emperor roared. His aura towered into the sky. Clenching his fist, He threw it toward Soul 13 in the sky. Down below, the whole Xiaoyi divine dynasty was boiling. This was their divine emperor, their spiritual pillar. The crown prince of Xiaoyi clenched his fists. His eyes were red and he could feel his blood boiling. Looking at Soul 13 in the sky, he opened his mouth and let out a low growl. Soul 13's fleshly body was that of his father, the Titan Divine Emperor. This was a blood feud. The humans roared. The whole divine dynasty seemed to be boiling. The experts of the aristocratic families and the courtiers of the court all placed their hopes on the divine emperor. Standing on the top of the Luo family's skyscraper, Summer looked straight at the Xiaoyi divine emperor, who was rising into the sky step by step. She could only pray in her heart. The divine emperor could not fall. Once the divine emperor fell, the hope of mankind would truly be destroyed. Summer turned to look at the restaurant. Perhaps Bufang in the restaurant could carry the hope of mankind. However, Bufang had failed to comprehend the 5 supreme laws of the universe. He could not become a heaven god immediately, so the possibility of him fighting a heaven god-level soul demon was really slim. Soul 13's eyes narrowed slightly. I can't believe this human still dares to resist. He took a deep breath. His eyes seemed to burst into 1,000 dazzling lights. The surrounding soul demons clamored, and in addition to the noise, there were also sneers and disdainful laughter. These laughter made the human experts even more furious. Fight! The Xiaoyi Divine Emperor had turned into a young man, his eyes calm like an ancient well. Step by step, he rose into the sky and faced Soul 13. Divine power swirled around him. He threw out a punch. Behind him, the figure of an emperor emerged. It was the mental projection of the Divine Emperor fist. As soon as the punch was thrown, the void exploded in an instant. The terrible pressure made many numbered soul demons in the soul demon camp suck in their breath. The Xiaoyi Divine Emperor was indeed worthy of being the oldest of the 3 divine emperors. His strength was indeed fearsome. This punch could probably kill a numbered soul demon. Heaven and earth are unfair. Otherwise, how could the chaotic universe allow you disgusting soul demons to run wild here? The Xiaoyi Divine Emperor spat out a beam of divine light as he spoke. Every word was a gem. An uproar broke out among the soul demons. Rumble! Soul 13 was not in a hurry to attack. He hovered in midair with his arms crossed over his chest and his long tongue hanging down like a demon. Behind him, 2 numbered soul demons with silver-black insect scales and shrouded in black smoke rushed out. They were the top-numbered soul demons among the soul demons. They faced the young divine emperor head-on. A fierce battle broke out in an instant. However, the 2 top-numbered soul demons did not retreat, and they just clashed head-on with the divine emperor's body. The soul demons had absolute confidence in their fleshly bodies, which were comparable to divine weapons. Rumble! An earth-shattering collision exploded in the sky. The 2 soul demons were knocked flying backward. The speed at which they flew backward was so fast that they smashed through a tall building. The divine emperor stood in midair, his vigorous hair waving in the wind as he punched out at a steady pace, suppressing the many soul demons with his own might. You're already a half-step heaven god. Unfortunately, there are too many restrictions in this chaotic universe. You have no chance of becoming a heaven god. Soul 13 could see the divine emperor's bottleneck. The Xiaoyi Divine Emperor was indeed a genius, but unfortunately, he was born at the wrong time. In today's era, heaven gods did not appear, but those who occupied the causality thrones of heaven gods were a terrible restriction for geniuses. The Divine Emperor's expression remained unchanged. The Divine Emperor's phantom behind him became more and more sluggish. His energy and blood were boiling, and wisps of blood-colored blood were drifting out of him. Every move and stance of his was filled with all of his strength and life force. Bam! 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 The 2 numbered soul demons struggled to their feet, but were knocked down again and again. In the end, even their scales were shattered, and they looked miserable. The Divine Emperor was so strong now that he could destroy the heavens. Soul 13 looked at the Divine Emperor calmly. Although the Divine Emperor was suppressing the numbered soul demons, he was not in a hurry. In front of him now, the numbered soul demons were no different from ants, and he could crush them with a snap of his fingers. So, he did not care. In fact, he was happy to see that happen. What he wanted to do was to wait until the humans' momentum reached its peak, to kill them in an instant. To make the humans' momentum crumble like a mountain torrent bursting its banks. Bam! The insect scales of the two numbered soul demons cracked, and they flew backward. All of a sudden Soul 13 moved. In the distance, he slowly raised his hand. He pointed at the Divine Emperor. Then, he narrowed his eyes and clenched his fist. Oh! The young Shui Divine Emperor's eyes burst into dazzling light as he felt an extremely terrible pressure. The pressure made him let out a long howl. It was as if the potential in his body had been awakened. He actually broke free from Soul 13's restraint. This human is a little tenacious. Soul 13's eyes were cold. He did not want to show any mercy to this human. He was just an emperor-level existence. There was no need to worry. Soul 13 moved. He took a step forward. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of the Divine Emperor. A palm strike and a fist strike, both of which carried supreme mysteries. In just 2 moves, the icy silver insect scales broke through the Divine Emperor's fleshly body. The Divine Emperor's pupils constricted, and he coughed out a mouthful of blood. Then, he flew backward and smashed hard into the ground, which cracked in an instant. In just 2 moves, the Shui Divine Emperor was defeated. The hope of mankind was crushed just like that. The officials, who were cheering noisily, stopped abruptly. They could not believe what they were seeing. They could not believe that this was the result. This soul demon had killed the Divine Emperor in seconds. Who else could stop him? All the humans were like ducks with their necks pinched. They could not even shout. Even if they could, their voices were hoarse. He, I've said, submit to me and you can live. If you don't, you'll become my food and be eaten by me. Soul 13 said coldly. Whether the Shui Divine Emperor burned his blood and energy or not, it did not affect him. He was a soul overlord, a heaven god-level existence. How could a mere emperor stop him? God kings and god emperors were collectively known as gods. They were just gods, so how could they compare to the heavenly gods of a higher realm, the supreme heavenly gods? Soul 13 curled his long, narrow tongue. Then, he slowly lifted the Shui Divine Emperor's fleshly body. Narrowing his eyes, he glanced at the people present. His goal was to keep these humans in captivity. Only in this way could he have an inexhaustible supply of food. No one in this chaotic universe can stop me. Soul 13 burst out laughing excitedly. The humans were in complete despair. Looking at the Divine Emperor, who was curled up by Soul 13's tongue and could not struggle at all, they felt a deep pain in their hearts. Suddenly, a beam of light shot out of the Luo family's skyscraper. The slender beam of light rushed into the sky. Immediately, the sky changed color and turned into a huge whirlpool. Oh! Soul 13's eyes narrowed, and the eyeballs on his forehead suddenly turned red. It's that damned human chef. I've finally found his aura. Soul 13's wings spread out behind him, which were as sharp as blades. His cold voice exploded through the sky. Chapter 1575. Attention, host. The upgrade has begun. Please don't move. The system's serious voice rang out, lingering in Bufang's mind. Bufang's face was expressionless, and his heart was unmoved. He even wanted to laugh. Why couldn't he move during the upgrade? For the first time, Bufang was puzzled. He had never had so many bad habits before. Will anything bad happen if I move? Will it cause the upgrade to fail? Bufang asked the system faintly. However, the system did not want to answer Bufang. Buzz, a beam of light immediately gathered around Bufang. Demigod was Bufang's strength before he broke through. In fact, a demigod was not a god. In other words, Bufang, who had killed countless gods, was just a mortal. The limit of the great sage was a demigod, but the great sage was just a mortal. Of course, for Bufang, it did not matter whether he was a mortal or not. Even if he was a mortal, he could still kill a god. After all, he had gathered all 5 supreme laws of the universe. The sage realm was divided into the minor sage realm and the great sage realm. However, the god realm was divided into many levels, such as the low level, medium level, and high level. This was a small division. The god king realm was the highest level, and the god emperor realm was the highest level, just like the demigod realm was the highest level of the great sage realm. Now that Bufang was about to break through, Bufang did not know what realm he would be in after the breakthrough. However, he was curious himself. With a thought, Bufang opened the system panel. Host: Bufang True Energy Cultivation Base. 9th Revolution Great Sage Realm, Demigod, Cooking Talent. 9 stars skills. Level 2 Meteor Knife Technique, 100 out of 100. Level 2 Big Dipper Carving Technique, 100 out of 100. Level 1 Knife Technique. Overlord 13 Blades, 1313. Gourmet Formation, 5-6. Cutting Immortal Style, 3/3. Tools: Golden Dragon Bone Kitchen Knife, Tool Spirit Hibernating. Black Turtle Constellation Walk, Tool Spirit Hibernating. Vermilion Chef Robe, Tool Spirit Hibernating. White Tiger Heaven Stove, Tool Spirit Hibernating. Chelan Transmigration Ladle. God of Cooking Overall Rating. Heaven Divine Chef, please continue to work hard. System Level. Level 4. Helps host embark on the path to becoming the god of cooking. System Reward. None. Without a doubt, the system panel indicated that Bufang had not broken through yet. This breakthrough process would probably take a long time. After all, going from a demigod to a god was a qualitative leap. It was a transformation from a mortal to a god. This was a very important moment in Bufang's life. Bufang knew that once he became a god, he would be closer and closer to the god of cooking. He would also be closer and closer to the realm of the god of cooking that he had always dreamed of. However, Bufang knew very well that he could not rush it. The tool panel showed that the artifact spirits were all asleep. This made Bufang frown. Perhaps after this matter was over, he would need to find the place he was familiar with and wake up the artifact spirits, as Chelan had said. Without the artifact spirits, the god of cooking set was not a complete set. Without the artifact spirits, Bufang knew that it was impossible for him to become the god of cooking. The power of the god of cooking was a path of no return, but it was also a path to perfection. There should be no mistakes on this path. There should be no room for mistakes. After all, there was only one chance. Rumble! Bufang suddenly felt that his body was a little hot, and his eyes lit up. Buzz, his aura began to erupt, blooming like a blazing sun. Brilliant light erupted from the top of his head and rushed into the sky. In the blink of an eye, it rushed into the sky, turning it into a huge energy vortex. At this moment, Bufang's body began to transform. Rumble! Soul 13's eyes were fixed on Bufang's position. Bufang was standing on the top floor of the Luo family's skyscraper. At this moment, Bufang's aura was very obvious. Soul 13 could clearly sense the fluctuation of this aura. His tongue rolled back and wrapped around the Divine Emperor's body. The sharp barbs cut the Divine Emperor's flesh and made him bleed. However, the Divine Emperor only frowned slightly. When he saw that Soul 13 had locked on to Bufang's position, his expression flickered. On the top floor of the Luo family's skyscraper, Soul 13's face turned very unsightly. Bufang is breaking through now. Once Bufang breaks through and becomes a god, he will definitely have the potential to become a heaven god in the future. I can't let Bufang fall here. The Xiaoyi Divine Emperor's eyes were red. At this moment, he was burning like a fireball. He pushed his divine sense to the extreme. Blazing flames surged in all directions. Soul 13 felt a stabbing pain in his tongue, and he immediately jerked his tongue back. Damn it! Rumble! After breaking free from Soul 13's restraint, the Divine Emperor immediately shone like a blazing sun. Soul 13, on the other hand, was glowing with a silver light. Your opponent is me. At this moment, the Xiai Divine Emperor looked like a heaven god, and his whole body seemed to be about to transform into energy. His skin was fair and fluttering, and he looked like an immortal descending to the mortal world. His long black hair was bold and vigorous, and it actually fluttered in the air. The golden armor on his body made him look even more like a real god. Who do you think you are? Do you think you're worthy to be my opponent? Soul 13 narrowed his eyes. He was too lazy to pay attention to the Xiai Divine Emperor. 2 deity emperors had already died in his hands. One more and one less would not make a difference. At this moment, the one he wanted to kill was Bufang. Or rather, the one he wanted to devour was Bufang. Bufang's innate talent made his hair stand on end. If he devoured this kind of human genius, his strength would skyrocket again. After all, he had just become a soul overlord, and his strength was still a little superficial. If he encountered the soul overlords of the soul demon universe, he might be killed in an instant. However, if he devoured Bufang, he could strengthen his foundation and give him the strength to fight against veteran soul overlords. So, he could not care less about the Divine Emperor. Not to mention, in addition to Bufang, there was also the aura of the cursed goddess in the restaurant. Once he, the gluttony soul overlord, devoured these two fellows, he was certain that he could even stabilize his body among the soul overlord. Swoosh! The wings on Soul 13's back flashed. They seemed to cut through the void and burst out. He opened his mouth, and the dark space in it that looked like a boundless universe began to spin. He was very hungry. So, he planned to eat the whole skyscraper. Rumble! Soul 13 flew past the Xiai Divine Emperor in a flash. He could not believe that the Divine Emperor was ignored. The Xiai Divine Emperor's body seemed to be evaporating at any moment. In less than 1/100th of a breath then, he stood in front of Soul 13. Without hesitation, he threw out the Divine Emperor fist. How dare you stop me? You've overestimated yourself. Soul 13 growled. His scarlet eyes flashed in an instant. Boom! His silver body rolled over like a steel chariot. The Xiai Divine Emperor's body was almost blown apart in an instant. Puff! He coughed up a mouthful of blood. His aura was weak. However, his eyes were still firm as he stared at Soul 13. You're courting death. I'll fulfill your wish. Soul 13's eyes were cold. He raised his paw. Then, he grabbed the Xiai Divine Emperor's head. With a swoosh, he crashed toward the Luo family's skyscraper. The soul demons roared excitedly. The humans, on the other hand, were completely silent. They could not believe that their spiritual pillar, His Majesty, was crushed by that soul demon like a dead dog. Was the gap between them really so big? Where was the heaven god? Where was he? Some of the humans began to riot. Boom! Soul 13 grabbed Xiaoyu's head and fiercely pressed him against the door of the restaurant. With a loud bang, the wooden door of the restaurant shook and creaked. Summer, who was upstairs, felt a chill in her heart as she watched the scene up close. She looked at Xiaoyu, who was covered in blood under Soul 13's paw, and suddenly felt a stabbing pain in her heart. Perhaps she began to understand Xiaoyu's persistence. It was because he was the Divine Emperor of the Divine Dynasty. In the face of disaster, if the Divine Emperor did not bear it, who else could? You really don't know what's good for you. But don't worry, I won't kill you. I'm going to keep you in captivity. You know the story of killing the chicken to get the eggs, right? This story tells us that if we want more eggs, we should raise the chicken well. The corners of Soul 13's mouth twitched. The Xiai Divine Emperor fixed his eyes on Soul 13 through the paw and stared at his face. Buzz. Suddenly, a waterfall of divine power smashed toward him. Bam! It smashed Soul 13's silver insect scales. However, the force was too weak, so weak that it did not even leave a scratch on Soul 13's insect scales. Oh! However, this small waterfall also attracted Soul 13's attention. Narrowing his scarlet eyes, he turned his head and looked in the direction of the waterfall. There, Summer's eyes were fixed on Soul 13. A mid-grade god king? Soul 13 froze for a moment, then the corners of his mouth twitched and he sneered. His sneer made Summer's face flush with anger. Does this guy have to laugh so exaggeratedly? Doesn't a mid-grade god king need respect? Scram! Soul 13's laughter stopped abruptly. Then, the vertical eye on his forehead suddenly emitted a burst of light. Buzz, a scarlet beam of light shot out of it. It sped toward Summer like a bolt of lightning. The light beam that almost suffocated Summer made her feel as if she had fallen into an ice cave. Under the light beam, she did not even have the strength to lift her leg to dodge. No wonder Xia Yuhe was beaten so miserably. This soul demon has really become a great demon. Is this the legendary Heaven God realm? Even Bufang, who had comprehended 4 supreme laws of the universe, would have to exhaust all his trump cards in the face of a Heaven God's attack. Not to mention Summer at this moment. In front of this beam of light, she was as weak as a moth flying into a flame. In the next second, she was about to turn into ashes. Summer could already feel the aura of death. The aura of death made her face pale and bloodless. After shooting out the beam of light, Soul 13 was too lazy to pay attention to Summer. In his opinion, this evil woman was going to die. So, he fixed his eyes on the restaurant. The chef was in the restaurant. Does he want to break through to the god realm? So what if I let him become a god? It's just a little more delicious. Xia Yuhe's pupils constricted to the size of sesame seeds. He watched as the beam of light approached Summer. Summer was his sister and his only family now. He did not want to see her die like this. However, he was powerless. Suddenly, Xia Yuhe froze. Soul 13 froze as well. A melodious voice rang out. In this solemn atmosphere, it seemed a little comical. Summer has passed quietly, leaving behind a little secret. I can't tell you, hee. Soul 13's scarlet eyes changed. His sharp eyes turned round as he looked at Zhang Xian in confusion. Who the F***ck played this song? His eyes were tightly closed in the Summer, and his entire body was trembling. She could not move at all. However, when the scarlet beam of light approached her body, it did not kill her. Instead, a blurry figure appeared in front of her. It was a hazy figure. It was graceful and beautiful, like a woman. Summer froze for a moment, then looked down at the necklace around her swan-like neck. At this moment, the necklace was broken. It was given to her by Mu Hongzi. If you have what it takes, go to the restaurant and bully that chef. What's so great about bullying a woman? Bah! 7 major crimes? More like 7 major crimes. My little Summer is so cute, and you dare to lay your hands on her? If you have what it takes, come and find me. I'll fight you for 300 rounds. If I'm a coward, I won't be called Mu Zongxin. The peerless figure of light, who looked like a banished immortal, opened his mouth and let out a roar. His roar made everyone dumbfounded. Soul 13's scarlet eyes widened. He opened his mouth but could not say a word. What the F***ck is this? The corner of Xia Yuhe's mouth twitched as Soul 13 pressed against the door. Who is Mu Zongxin? Could it be Mu Hongzi? However, at this moment, he felt a warmth in his heart. It turned out that Mu Hongzi had set up a protection on Summer. If it were not for this protection, she would have died. For once, the unreliable Mu Hongzi was reliable. Get lost. Soul 13's eyes returned to normal, and he growled coldly. That chattering guy annoyed him. He loosened his grip on Xiaoyuhe. Then, he appeared in front of Summer in a flash. With a swipe of his claw, the void cracked inch by inch, and the cracks in the void could still be seen. Mu Hongzhi's chattering figure was torn to pieces in an instant. However, to everyone's surprise, Summer's body was torn to pieces as well. Oh! When the last speck of light faded away, Summer's figure had disappeared from where she was. Mu Hongzhi had taken her away. Suppressing his anger, Soul 13 felt a little aggrieved. As a soul overlord, he could not believe that someone had run away after showing off. Now, he wished he could devour everything. When he was angry, he wanted to eat. Xiaoyuhe breathed a sigh of relief. He slumped in the doorway and twitched the corner of his mouth slightly. Mu Hongzhi has taken Summer away. This made him feel much more at ease. At least, the Xiai divine dynasty would not be completely wiped out. Who the hell is Mu Hongzhi? He's able to block a blow from a heaven god level existence. Did I misjudge that guy before? Soul 13 turned his eyes back to the restaurant. As for the Xiai divine emperor, who was lying like a dead dog, he did not even look at him. Saliva kept dripping from his enlarged mouth. All he wanted to do now was to eat that chef. No one could stop him. Creak! Suddenly, Soul 13 paused. The closed door of the restaurant opened. Oh! Pretending to be a ghost. Are you ready to die after opening the door? Soul 13 grinned coldly. Then, he strode toward the restaurant. With a single step, he stepped into the restaurant. All of a sudden, he stepped into the restaurant. His scarlet eyes focused, and a figure was reflected in the light. It was a chubby figure. His whole body glowed with a metallic luster. His mechanical eyes flickered as he sensed Soul 13's violent aura. The 3 flags behind him fluttered. Troublemaker will be stripped as an example to others. Chapter 1576. What's that? Soul 13's eyes narrowed as he stared at the lump of iron that had walked out of the restaurant. The bald iron lump was a good match for the silver scale armor on his body. But why does this thing have the courage to be so arrogant in front of me? And to strip as an example to others? A mere lump of iron would be crushed in an instant. The wings behind Soul 13 shrank, and he took one step at a time. The ground in the restaurant trembled and rumbled. Soul 13's scarlet eyes turned and fell on Bufang. He saw Bufang, who was sitting in a chair. The latter sat on a chair with a peculiar aura fluctuating around his body, as if he was about to rise into the void. His pupils constricted. Yes, it's this chef, this damned stinky chef. Ever since Bufang stopped him from eating the oyster pancake, he hated this chef to the bone. Although he was a gluttony soul overlord, when he thought of the taste of the oyster pancake, he still felt disgusted. So, he would kill this stinky chef no matter where he went, even if he was in the Acheron Valley. A captive? No way. This stinky chef must be slaughtered and eaten on the spot. He rolled his eyes and rested them on Bufang's side. There, you sat coldly, looking at him without the slightest emotion. Cursed goddess, stinky chef. Everything is in place. Soul 13 felt a pang of hunger in his belly, which made him even more violent. As a gluttony soul overlord, all he had to do was eat. Eat everything. First I'll eat the chef, then I'll eat the cursed goddess. Ha ha. Soul 13 laughed as if he had lost his mind. Then, he trotted all the way toward Bufang. He did not think anyone could stop him. The strongest human, Xiaoyuhe, was now lying in front of the restaurant like a dead dog. Who could stop him? Under the path understanding tree, Lord Go slowly opened his eyes, glanced at Soul 13, and yawned. His chubby body turned over, and then he went back to sleep. Rumble! Soul 13 stomped his foot, and the whole restaurant seemed to tremble. His sharp silver claws grabbed at Bufang, trying to twist Bufang's head off. Suddenly, A fan-like palm blocked in front of him. Looking at the palm, Soul 13 was stunned. The sharp claws that could cut through anything collided with the fan-like palm. A clanging sound rang out. Soul 13 found that his claws had been blocked. This lump of metal could actually stop him? He was a spirit overlord. What the hell are you? Soul 13's eyes burst into dazzling light as he roared. Boom! He wanted to erupt with the power of darkness and completely destroy this iron puppet. However, troublemakers will be stripped as an example to others, Xiao Bai said mechanically. Then, with a clanging sound, the flag behind him descended from the sky. Soul 13 found that he could not use the power of the Soul Overlord that was surging like magma in his body. It was as if it had been sealed by some powerful force. For a moment, he was unable to break free. Just as he was about to break free, the iron puppet was approaching. Soul 13 opened his mouth and roared. At this moment, he was still wondering why he could not use the power of the Soul Overlord. It seemed a little strange. Bam! A huge fist approached and smashed into his face with a thud. Just like that, Soul 13 was forced to take a step back. Whitey's mechanical eyes flickered. It was unforgiving. His chubby figure was very agile, and in an instant, he approached Soul 13. One palm after another flew toward Soul 13's head. It was as if metal was colliding with metal, causing a clanging sound to ring out. Rumbling filled the air. Soul 13 was dumbfounded. Perhaps even he did not expect that, as a spirit overlord, he would be pressed to the ground and beaten by an iron puppet in a restaurant. Xiaoyuhe, who had fallen in front of the door, also widened his eyes. Even though he was seriously injured, he had to watch with wide eyes. Was the iron puppet in Bufang's restaurant so strong? How could it suppress Soul 13, who was comparable to a heaven god? It's a clothes-stripping demon. Outside, many people were in an uproar. Many of the experts who had suffered from Xiao Bai's inhuman treatment were inexplicably excited. Since even Soul 13 was suppressed by this puppet, it was not surprising that they were stripped naked. Xiao Bai's series of attacks stunned Soul 13, and he did not even have time to react. Suddenly, his silver face froze. At some point, Xiao Bai's huge palms had grabbed his shoulders and thighs. Strip him! Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed. With a wave of his hand, he was about to begin stripping Soul 13's clothes. However, Soul 13's body was covered with silver insect scales, which were the Soul Demon's protection. In fact, they were also a part of his skin. Xiao Bai's hand slid across them. The stripping failed. Soul 13 was naked from beginning to end. This time, it was Xiao Bai's turn to be dumbfounded. Obviously, he did not understand why he did not feel the pleasure of stripping Soul 13's clothes. What's with that slippery feeling? Even a clothes-stripping demon would fail one day? Can I disable my power? Whether it's the power of law or the power of sin. Interesting. Soul 13 looked down at Xiao Bai. Even though their postures were quite indecent, he did not care. In just a short while, he had figured out Xiao Bai's trick. This iron puppet was not strong. It relied on the power of the restriction to force people to fight with their flesh. However, as a soul overlord, he had never been afraid of a physical body. Soul 13 grinned. He raised a hand and grabbed Xiao Bai's round head. Then, his eyes lit up. His head slammed into Xiao Bai's. Bam! A clanging sound rang out and sparks flew in all directions. Whitey staggered a few steps back from the impact. His mechanical eyes flickered. A physical body? Soul 13 kept sneering. He thought this iron puppet was a hidden heaven god, which scared him so much that his heart constricted. He knew that he, who had just become a soul overlord, was no match for the veteran heaven gods of this chaotic universe. But now, he was sure. This iron puppet was actually a little strange. After all, he was a soul overlord, so he was fearless in a melee fight. His head kept falling. With the protection of the insect scales, His head was not afraid of being hit at all. Xiao Bai was a little confused. The next moment Soul 13's eyes flashed. The insect scales on his body made a cracking sound. Immediately, a waterfall of insect scales shot out and sealed Xiao Bai's body. Xiao Bai fell to the ground as if he was caught in a big net. His mechanical eyes flickered, and he struggled for a while, but he could not get up. He was like a turtle that had been turned over. Soul 13 grinned and played with his sharp claws. His eyes were fixed on Bufang. This time, no one is going to stop me. You focused her eyes. She did not expect Xiao Bai to be defeated so quickly, but it was normal. Rumble, her hair turned ghostly green in an instant. You slowly stood up from her seat. Ghostly green energy seeped out of her body. Although she had not fully mastered the dead woman's power, she could no longer hold back now. The pressure that Soul 13 put on her was too great. The power of a cursed goddess. Unfortunately, you are not a phenomenal cursed goddess. Soul 13 sneered. Nethery raised her hand, and the ghostly green cursed snake emerged and coiled around her. It hissed and flicked its forked tongue, bursting out with a terrifying aura. The power of curses did not belong to the supreme laws of the universe, but its power was no weaker than that of the supreme laws. Yu's hair fluttered in the wind. Her long, fair legs moved slowly. Step by step, she walked toward Soul 13. Go, Yu said. The cursed snake flung its arm. Immediately, it opened its fangs and lunged at Soul 13. Hissing sounds rang out incessantly. Soul 13 smiled disdainfully. The power of curses was indeed terrible. If it were in the past, he would have been afraid, but now that he had become a soul overlord, what was he afraid of? He opened his mouth wide, as if there was a bottomless pit in his mouth. Gluttony's sinful energy surged. It wrapped around the cursed snake. The cursed snake struggled, but Soul 13 just laughed. A suction force erupted from his mouth, and swallowed the cursed snake into his belly. He swallowed it whole. Yu's expression immediately changed. The cursed snake was eaten? You stay here too, Soul 13 said coldly. His body flashed, and he immediately approached Yu's side. The silver insect scales on his back suddenly expanded. Poochie poochie, the insect scales seemed to have turned into a steel cage, locking Yu inside. I'll kill that chef first, and then I'll eat you slowly. A cursed goddess is hard to come by. Soul 13's saliva dripped from his mouth as he swallowed, his eyes bursting with a ferocious light. His eyes were locked on Bufang. At this moment, Bufang was immersed in a strange feeling. It was as if his divine sense had drifted up along the beam of light and rushed into the boundless starry sky. In the starry sky, every star exuded the power of the law and was attracting him, trying to resonate with the power in him. However, he had the power of 5 laws, so if he wanted to resonate with them, he would need a god with the power of the 5 supreme laws to do so. When the stars sensed his aura, they trembled with fear and chose to give up on resonating with him. For a moment, Bufang was like a wandering child, drifting in the boundless starry sky. At this moment, Bufang felt as if he had returned to the sea of laws. The starry sky was constantly changing. The universe seemed to be changing as well. Everything was rotating, filled with a strange aura. He reached out a hand, trying to grab the wisp of resonance. However, he caught nothing time and time again, causing him to feel rather annoyed. Suddenly, Bufang sensed an aura. This aura is somewhat familiar. It was the aura of a heaven god. Although he did not know if it was the same heaven god who had injured him, Bufang still narrowed his eyes. The heaven god's aura had sensed Bufang. After circulating around Bufang's body for a while, it did not choose to guide him. Then, one heaven god's aura after another appeared. However, none of them guided him. This was a little awkward, Bufang frowned. Without guidance, he could not break through to the god realm. Could it be that he really could not become a god? These heaven gods must be doing this on purpose. No. It's not on purpose. Bufang's heart skipped a beat. He had comprehended 5 supreme laws of the universe. It was not that these heaven gods did not guide him on purpose, but they did not dare to. They did not dare to guide him. Bufang heaved a sigh of relief inwardly. His will gradually drifted away, rising higher and higher. Since no heaven god dared to guide him, he would tear a hole himself. Bufang was determined to become a god. Rumble, the aura on his body began to surge. It grew brighter and brighter. The 5 laws turned into 5 wheels wheeling around him. Bufang's heart skipped a beat. Then 5 gourmet arrays emerged. The gourmet arrays superimposed, pushing Bufang's body up in the air. It was as if he was illuminating the heavens. Rumble. In the restaurant, Soul 13's mouth was dripping with saliva as he approached Bufang. His whole body was trembling. However, just as he was about to reach Bufang, the light beams around Bufang began to recede rapidly. Oh! The scene not only stunned Soul 13, but also all the humans, including the Xiai Divine Emperor, were stunned. Without the guidance of a god, could it be that Bufang had failed to break through? He had failed to comprehend 5 supreme laws, and now he had failed to break through. Could the disaster of mankind really not be avoided? Bufang, who was known as the hope of mankind, had completely failed. When Soul 13 came to his senses, he could not help but burst out laughing. He was laughing heartily. I didn't expect this chef to have such a day. All of this is retribution. Even the god of mankind doesn't want to guide you. In that case, let me eat you. Soul 13 burst out laughing. His mouth opened wide, and then opened wide. Finally, it seemed to turn into a huge black hole that was about to swallow Bufang whole. Under the path understanding tree, Lord Dog, who was lying on it, furrowed his brows and slowly opened his eyes. The fats on his body were trembling. He gave Bufang a puzzled look and stuck out his tongue. Then, a dog paw slowly stretched out from under his chubby fat. However, just as Lord Go was about to strike, his movements froze. The corners of his mouth twitched, and the dog paw that had stretched out retracted. Bufang, who had retracted his aura, slowly opened his eyes. With an expressionless face, he glanced at Soul 13, who had opened his mouth wide and was laughing while trying to bite him. Anorexia. Cured? How dare you open your mouth in front of me now? Bufang said lightly. Chapter 1577. Bufang opened his eyes. What came into view was Soul 13's ferocious face. His silver face was glowing coldly, and he looked a little fierce. He was very confident that he should be able to defeat this chef. After all, he had gone through all kinds of hardships to become a soul overlord in this chaotic universe. He did not think that anyone could defeat him. As long as the heaven gods of this world did not appear, he was invincible. No one could stop him, not even the Divine Emperor, and not even this chef in front of him. He was an existence destined to climb to the peak. Have you recovered from your anorexia? How dare you open your mouth in front of me? Bufang said lightly. His words were neither salty nor bland. There was no righteous indignation, nor was there any raging anger. It was so calm that it was as if he was enjoying the shade and had asked in a friendly manner if he had eaten. However, his words seemed to have touched Soul 13's sore spot. His scarlet eyes constricted. You're courting death. The next moment, without hesitation, the black hole in his mouth came crashing down, intending to devour Bufang completely. The surrounding people let out cries of surprise. Soul 13's strength was obvious to all. Even a divine emperor was no match for him. How could Bufang resist him? Bufang was hailed as the hope of mankind, but now it seemed that this hope was about to be snuffed out. What should I do? The eyes of the weak divine emperor, who was leaning against the door, flashed with reluctance. He had tried his best to protect Bufang so that Bufang could break through, but now it seemed that it was still not enough. The The Shui divine dynasty probably can't hold on any longer. Even the chaotic universe can't hold on any longer. Rumble! A tremendous amount of energy swept out of Soul 13's mouth, which looked like a black hole of the cycle of reincarnation. It stretched as far as the eye could see, and it was extremely gruesome. Bufang slowly raised his head, frowning as he stared at the black hole. In his eyes, Soul 13 was just opening his mouth. His hand shook. Bufang focused his eyes, and an oyster pancake appeared in his hand. Steam swirled around it, and waves of heat rolled out. With a jerk of his hand, Bufang stuffed it into Soul 13's mouth. Even though Soul 13 had become a soul overlord, he was still a soul demon. To him, human food was still disgusting. However, Soul 13 did not dodge the oyster pancake thrown by Bufang this time. As a gluttony soul overlord, why would I be afraid of your food? No matter how disgusting it was still food. I, gluttony, devour everything in the world. As soon as the oyster pancake entered Soul 13's mouth, it disappeared and was swept up by the energy. Soul 13's mind was as firm as a rock as he sneered. He continued to press forward. Voila! Bufang stood up from his seat and took a step back. Obviously, Bufang did not expect that the oyster pancake, which had always been successful, would fail to repel Soul 13. Of course, Bufang would not allow himself to be captured without putting up a fight. Therefore, he left his position. Bufang pulled out the ladle hanging at his waist and smashed it at Soul 13's head. Bam! The Qilin transmigration ladle was a complete god of cooking set. It could even destroy a heaven god's attack. It was different from the other incomplete god of cooking set. The ladle hit Soul 13 squarely on the head. Soul 13 thought he could block it, but who would have thought that Bufang would pull out a ladle and smash it at him? How dare you take out a mere ladle in front of me? Soul 13 growled. However, the Qilin transmigration ladle smashed down. Soul 13's roar came to an abrupt halt. The ladle landed lightly on his head and knocked him unconscious. A crisp sound rang out. A crisp sound rang out, causing Soul 13's hair to stand on end. He could not believe it. He took a few steps back, raised his hand, and touched his forehead. There, his silver insect scales were cracked. He could not believe that the chef in front of him had smashed his scales with a ladle. How was that possible? His defense was so strong that even a god emperor might not be able to hurt him at all. However, this chef managed to break it with just one knock. Buzz, however, the broken insect's scales quickly recovered. Soul 13 was now a soul overlord, so his recovery ability was extraordinary. Unless he was crushed to a pulp, there would be nothing left of him. Otherwise, he would not have died. He would not have died in this life. Bufang toyed with the ladle in his hand. Boom! Suddenly, Bufang's aura changed, and his eyes grew serious. He grabbed the ladle with one hand. Holding it with one hand, he swung it upward and smashed it hard on Soul 13's chin. With a loud bang, Soul 13 was sent flying backward, the insect scales on his body shattering again and again. The surrounding people were stunned. Whether they were soul demons or humans, their eyes widened as they stared at Bufang, who had knocked out a heaven god soul overlord with a ladle. They were somewhat dumbfounded. This demigod is really heaven-defying. Can't even a soul overlord deal with him? Soul 13 got up from the ground. He was a little shocked. But now, he had calmed down. He knew that Bufang was a little different. He took a deep breath. In the soul demon universe, when humans were in a desperate situation, peerless geniuses would also be born, who wanted to fight for the rise of mankind. Such geniuses were very terrible. According to the records of the soul demons, such humans were geniuses who could not be judged by common sense. However, so what if they were such geniuses? In the past, the peerless genius of the soul demon universe, who was about to lead mankind to a turnaround, was killed by the soul god with a slap. Even now, his soul was still imprisoned by the soul god and suffering inhuman torture. Troubled times produce heroes. Perhaps the chef in front of him was a hero in the troubled world of soul demons. Soul 13 calmed himself down. He wanted to treat Bufang as normal. Bufang toyed with the ladle. In his mind, he was recalling what he had seen and what had happened. He was about to become a god, but no god, not even a heaven god, was willing to guide him. It was the biggest joke in the world. Bufang had a headache at first, but in the end, he gave up. Since there were no gods to guide him, he chose to become a heaven illuminator. Then, he broke through the shackles and became a god. In his mind, the system's serious voice kept ringing out. In Bufang's mind, there was a buzzing sound like bees collecting honey. Congratulations to the host for successfully breaking through. You have received the promotion reward. The reward will now be distributed. The reward has been successfully distributed. The energy in the host's body has begun to convert. The true energy is being converted into divine power. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the opportunity to become a god. Will the host choose to take the test? The number of tests the system had received in its entire life might not be as many as this one. Bufang was a little confused. After a careful analysis, Bufang answered them one by one. The test to become a god. Accept. Buzz with a thought, Bufang called up the system panel. At this moment, the panel had undergone a shocking change. Host. Bufang True Energy Cultivation Base. God Realm Cooking Talent. 10 stars skills. Level 2 Meteor Knife Technique, 100 out of 100. Level 2 Big Dipper Carving Technique, 100 out of 100. Level 1 Knife Technique. Overlord 13 Blades, 1313. Gourmet Formation, 5-6. Cutting Immortal Style, 3/3. Tools. Golden Dragon Bone Kitchen Knife, Tool Spirit Hibernating. Black Turtle Constellation Walk, Tool Spirit Hibernating. Vermilion Chef Robe, Tool Spirit Hibernating. White Tiger Heaven Stove, Tool Spirit Hibernating. Chelan Transmigration Ladle. God of Cooking Overall Rating. Heaven Divine Chef, please continue to work hard. System Level. Level 5, you and I will walk on the path to becoming the God of Cooking. System Reward. The right to teleport to the land where the artifact spirit slumbers. Divine Ability. God of Cooking's Eye. Bufang looked at the system panel carefully. At this moment, the system panel had undergone a huge change. Without a doubt, Bufang had successfully broken through from a demigod to a god. It was possible to illuminate the heavens. Although no deity had chosen to receive him, Bufang had relied on himself to forge a path for himself. A look of anger appeared on Soul 13's cold face. This chef is actually in a daze while fighting me? Is he looking down on me, Soul 13, or is he looking down on a soul overlord? A soul overlord is equivalent to a heaven god. Does he really think a heaven god is a pushover? Soul 13 focused his eyes. Then, his aura became more and more terrifying. Standing where he was, pitch-black demonic energy kept spreading out of the restaurant as if to envelop heaven and earth. All the people who sensed this terrifying aura felt their bodies become extremely heavy. This was the pressure that belonged to a heaven god. It was just like when the divine emperor broke through the heaven god tribulation and Bufang struck out with the heaven god's palm. The oppressive aura made everyone tremble. Even the Shui divine emperor's eyes were filled with despair. This aura was not weaker than the heaven god's aura. There was no doubt that Soul 13 was now comparable to a heaven god. How could they fight him? If they were in the ancient times, when heaven gods roamed freely, they might not be afraid. But now the heaven gods had disappeared, and if the present heaven gods did not make a move, they would not be able to hold on. Boom! Boom! Soul 13 wanted to blast the restaurant to pieces with his aura. However, no matter how strong his aura was, he could not crush the restaurant. Instead, the surrounding houses exploded one by one. Bufang was also awakened by this aura. He jerked his head up and looked at Soul 13, who was floating in midair. Soul 13 flew out of the restaurant and hovered in midair, as if he had devoured all the light between heaven and earth. Chef, I don't want to waste any more time with you. You can die now. All of you can die now. Soul 13's eyes burst into a ferocious light. He chose to kill everything. As for keeping humans in captivity, there would always be some left in other small world. He could just keep them in captivity when the time came. Bam! Bam! Soul 13 hovered in midair. At this moment, he no longer concealed his aura as a soul overlord. The ground cracked, and one tall building after another was blown to pieces. The entire capital of the Xiaoyi divine dynasty changed in an instant. However, only the Luo family's skyscraper stood firm. Soul 13's jaw dropped. Behind him, there seemed to be a terrible beast crawling out of the darkness. Like a Taotai, the beast was going to devour everything in the world. The gluttony demon lord was a disaster for heaven and earth. Rumble, the ground exploded. 1, 2, 3, they were demonic dragons condensed of dark energy. They soared into the sky, swaying in midair and completely enveloping the capital of the Xiaoyi divine dynasty. Their bodies were level with the skyscraper, and they stared coldly at it. The restaurant on the top floor of the skyscraper was extremely small. Even the door was not as big as the eyes of the black dragons. The black dragons stared at the restaurant. At this moment, the entire restaurant seemed to become transparent. Bufang breathed a sigh of relief. Gusts of wind were blowing non-stop. Bufang's head was much clearer now. Soul 13's pressure made him feel tremendous pressure. Fortunately, I made a breakthrough. Bufang thought to himself. If it were in the past, he would have been killed by Soul 13 in an instant. After all, Bufang was nearly killed when he faced a heaven god. However, things were different now. The current Bufang was no longer the Bufang of the past. Tap, tap, tap. The dragon bone kitchen knife spun in his hand. It slashed through the air with a ripping sound. The silver insect scales that bound Xiao Bai and Yu were cut off. Xiao Bai and Yu were free. They followed behind Bufang and walked out of the restaurant step by step with Bufang. The top floor of the skyscraper was already a mess. The wind was howling. Bufang walked out, his vermilion robe flapping noisily. After losing its artifact's spirit, the vermilion robe's invincibility had disappeared. However, even with its invincibility, it was ineffective against existences at the Soul Overlord level. Bufang exhaled. He clasped his hands behind his back and raised his head. In the sky, Soul 13 stood proudly like a peerless fiend god. His forehead glowed as he stared at Bufang. Their gazes collided. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched slightly. His mind flickered. When one became a god, he would comprehend his own divine ability. Generally speaking, divine abilities were derived from the power of laws. However, since Bufang had comprehended 5 supreme laws of the universe, what was his divine ability? The god of cooking's eye, this was the system's reward, as well as his divine ability. In that case, he might as well give it a try. Bufang raised his hand and rubbed his eyes. The god of cooking's eye was activated. Chapter 1578. The God of Cooking's Eye. Anything related to the god of cooking was certainly not an ordinary item. Bufang knew this very well. It was just like the god of cooking set and the god of cooking's menu. They were all very awesome. The divine ability he had awakened this time was the god of cooking's eye, which sounded invincible. Perhaps it was the kind of terrible ability that could impregnate anyone he looked at. That would be interesting, a terrible aura was clamoring. The humans had already fallen into complete despair. The gluttony soul overlord was equivalent to a heaven god. The aura and pressure of a heaven god enveloped the whole world, making everyone feel a sense of despair. Despair began to spread from the bottom of their hearts. Resist? How could they resist a heaven god? There were only 5 heaven gods in the whole chaotic universe, and no one knew where they had died. Even if the universe was destroyed, they might not show up. A heaven god was just a trap. The divine emperor closed his eyes in despair. He thought he was very close to the level of a heaven god, but when he sensed Soul 13's aura, he finally understood. He was still far from that level. Soul 13 was just toying with him. If Soul 13 really wanted to kill him, he would have been dead by now. Perhaps this was the fate of mankind. When the soul demons appeared, it was all destined. The ancient heaven gods disappeared, and the current heaven gods did not appear. Perhaps it was all destined a long time ago. Soul 13 sneered as he unleashed his aura unscrupulously. 3 huge divine dragons made of black smoke exuded an extremely terrible aura. The 3 black dragons were summoned by Soul 13, and each of them exuded the aura of a god emperor. How could they fight them? Soul 13 alone was enough to make them despair. Now, there were 3 more god emperor level existences. This was simply a nightmare for all of them. Bufang stood on the top of the building. The vermilion robe was fluttering. The 3 divine dragons opened their mouths and swooped down toward Bufang, trying to swallow Bufang to death. Yu focused her eyes, and Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed. The black dragon's attack worried them as well. The god of cooking's eye. Suddenly, a voice that seemed to be slightly indifferent resounded. After that, the world seemed to have become quiet. Soul 13 hovered in the sky, smiling coldly. He crossed his arms over his chest as if everything was under his control. This time, the last divine dynasty of the human race would be destroyed, and the humans in this chaotic universe would have nothing to rely on. Then, he would be able to completely control this world and keep the humans in captivity. No one could stop him. Soul 13 grinned. His teeth were also silver. Boom, boom, boom. Underneath. Under his control, the 3 black gas divine dragons swooped toward the building. In an instant, they covered the entire building. Black gas swirled around the building. Without a doubt, even if this building was impregnable, it would soon be completely destroyed by the black dragon's attack. Kacha Kacha, the Luo family's skyscraper, was the commercial center of the Xiaoyi divine dynasty's capital. However, with the sweeping of the black gas, the surface of the building continued to crack, and the exterior became very dilapidated. However, to everyone's surprise, the building stood as firm as a rock. It did not move at all, as if it would not be destroyed no matter what. It was very strong and magical. The members of the Luo family were a little dumbfounded. When did their property become so sturdy? In the sky, all the soul demons burst out laughing. They looked at the humans crawling on the ground, and each of them revealed an excited smile. They were about to follow in the footsteps of the gluttony soul overlord and control a part of the universe. They, the soul demons, were going to become the masters of this universe. Suddenly, every soul demon was taken aback. Even Soul 13, who had been full of confidence, frowned and looked down at the building. The Luo family's skyscraper was surrounded by the black dragon. However, the next moment, the black dragon's body exploded. With a loud bang, it was as if there was some kind of resplendent light shooting out at this moment, causing the black dragon chi to dissipate like melting snow. Soul 13 was shocked when he sensed the disappearance of the black dragon aura. How is this possible? On the top of the skyscraper, Bufang stood there with his hands clasped behind his back, his face indifferent. His hair was waving in the wind, and the velvet rope that tied it up had long been broken. However, his expression did not change in the slightest. He widened his eyes and they shone with an extremely dazzling brilliance. A dazzling light burst out of them, and as Bufang blinked, the light flickered. The god of cooking's eye. This was the god of cooking's eye. It could see through all falsehoods, and it could see through the weaknesses of all things. Yes, the weaknesses, or rather, the entry point, as the cutting point of an ingredient, how to cut it so that an ingredient could be cut perfectly. Buzz, Soul 13 looked at Bufang on the top of the skyscraper and Bufang's eyes, and he frowned. This chef has come out to cause trouble again. What's wrong with that look in his eyes? Rumble. Soul 13 focused his eyes. Then, he raised his hand and turned it over. Black energy floated and spread in his palm. It was the power of sin that belonged to him. With a jerk, he pulled his palm up from the bottom. Immediately, the ground shattered, and the 3 divine dragons rushed up from the ground. "Kill this chef for me," Soul 13 said coldly as he controlled the divine dragon. On the top of the skyscraper, Bufang stared at the 3 divine dragons with wide eyes. Dazzling and dazzling light spread in all directions. It was as if a pair of eyes had opened from the depths of chaos, directly seeing through all falsehoods. Before the 3 divine dragons could get close to Bufang, they melted like snow. The soul demons were all stunned. Bufang rubbed his sore eyes. Killing with a glare was exciting, but it was tiring to use. He raised his eyes and looked at Soul 13. Soul 13 was not qualified to be an ingredient, but for the god of cooking, everything in the world could be an ingredient. Even a stone could be used to make delicious soup. As the god of cooking, he must have this kind of confidence. Therefore, when he regarded Soul 13 as an ingredient, in Bufang's god of cooking's eye 3 red dots appeared on Soul 13's body. Yes, 3 red dots, which meant that he was the entry point of an ingredient. Under normal circumstances, this was Soul 13's weakness. One was in his eyes. Another was in his armpits. The last one was under his thighs, in an indescribable position. It was a little deep. The 3 weak points were all in strange locations. As a heaven god-level soul overlord, Bufang actually saw 3 of his weaknesses. This Soul 13 was indeed somewhat unqualified. However, even with these 3 weaknesses, Bufang felt that he might not be able to kill him. The divine dragons condensed from the power of sin can't deal with you? Soul 13 narrowed his eyes. The next moment, he moved. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly. In that case, I, the Soul Overlord, will personally grant you death, Soul 13 said. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure seemed to have teleported, leaving a series of afterimages in the void. Each afterimage was like a ghost. In the blink of an eye, he was closing in on Bufang. In the sky, the soul demons roared once again. They did not stay idle. Instead, each of them unleashed a shocking aura of soul demons and rushed toward the humans on the ground. The humans had long been stimulated by the soul overlords, and they no longer had their previous fighting strength. Now, these humans were like pigs waiting to be slaughtered. Kill them! The soul demons roared. In the sky, countless soul demons approached in an instant. The bone warships whistled. Huge, ancient beasts of soul demons stepped through the void and approached. Boom! Boom! The soul demons were the first to attack. In the human camp, the powerhouses were terrified. The soul demons were invincible. Roar! A furious roar rang out. A naked expert swooped down from the sky like a savage beast and rushed into the battlefield in a flash. Kill them! Kill these filthy and disgusting soul demons! The Titan Crown Prince's eyes were red, and the barbaric glyphs on his body began to tremble. Like a mad beast, he rushed into the crowd of soul demons and began to slaughter them. He threw out punch after punch, killing the soul demons. His blood had been stirred up. Countless soul demons roared and swarmed toward him. The Titan Crown Prince's eyes were full of hatred. With a flip of his hand, he threw out a large wok of stinky tofu. As Bufang's apprentice chef, he had ordered a lot of stinky tofu. Boom! One stinky tofu after another exploded like firework. It was as if a smoke bomb had exploded in the air. The stench of stinky tofu almost turned black, spreading in all directions with the Crown Prince as the center. Come on, damned soul demons! Eat as much as you want. Blarg, the Titan Crown Prince hissed and growled. At this moment, he seemed to see the Titan Divine Emperor's kind smile and many acquaintances of the Titan Divine dynasty waving at him. Of course, in the end, it still turned into the pungent stench that rushed into his nostrils. He could not help but throw up in midair. He had injured 1,000 enemies, but he had lost 800 men. The stinky tofu exploded, turned into streams of light, and shot out in all directions. The soul demons madly chased after the stinky tofu. While the soul demons were enjoying the stinky tofu, their fleshly bodies were set ablaze and turned into ashes. The human camp's spirits rose. It turned out that they were not powerless to resist. Then, with bowls of stinky tofu in their hands, they rushed toward the soul demons crazily. Soul 13 appeared in front of Bufang, leaving numerous silver afterimages in his wake. Bufang felt a terrible aura coming at him. It was extremely terrifying, just like the palm the heaven god had thrown at him. Bufang breathed a sigh of relief. He focused his eyes. With a thought in his mind, the power of law exploded out in an instant. Buzz 1 round, 2 rounds, 3 rounds, 5 consecutive discs of law quietly climbed up from behind Bufang. Streams of power of law poured into Bufang's body, making Bufang feel that his aura was rising steadily. Currently, he had just stepped into the God realm. However, he fearlessly threw a punch at Soul 13's incoming attack. Bam! The punch, which contained the power of 5 laws, wrapped around Bufang's Tautai arm, making Bufang feel as if he could punch a hole in the sky. At this moment, Bufang's heart even swelled a little. His punch contained the power of 5 laws, which made his arm colorful. Let's call it the Fist of the Extreme Path. The ultimate law. Bam! The 2 fists collided in midair without any fancy move. The void instantly exploded. The entire sky was densely packed with cracks, and a myriad of turbulence surged out. The Xiao Divine Emperor's eyes widened as his heart trembled. Yu and Xiao Bai had already been pushed back into the restaurant by the tremendous pressure. There was no fancy move at all. Boom! Blasts of air surged as a figure kept retreating. Tap, tap, tap. Everyone's eyes widened. They saw Bufang stagger like a drunken man and finally sit down on the stone steps in front of the restaurant. The Xiao Divine Emperor's eyes darkened. Sure enough, I still can't do it? I thought Bufang could perform a miracle, but now it seems that he is still no match for Soul 13. After all, a soul overlord is equivalent to a heaven god. It's normal that he is no match for Bufang. Soul 13 remained motionless, the wings on his back flapping. He narrowed his eyes and looked at his fist. The silver insect scales covering his fist cracked and fell off slowly. A punch that contains the power of 5 laws is really powerful, he thought to himself. He felt the aura of a peerless genius in Bufang. It was just like the peerless genius who wanted to lead mankind to overthrow the soul demon's rule in the soul demon universe. However, he, Soul 13, would not repeat the same mistake. Soul 13's eyes lit up. His forehead glowed brightly. In the distance, Bufang rolled to his feet, rubbed his wrist, and breathed a sigh of relief. Focusing his eyes, he snapped his fingers. Crackle! A silver flame quietly bloomed in front of him. As Bufang became a god, it was time for the perfected divine flame to show its brilliance. Chapter 1579. The silver flame swayed its body, like a woman with a hot body, stroking her hair coquettishly. Bufang's eyes were fixed on the divine flame in front of him. Raise fire for 1,000 days, use fire for a moment. Xiaohua, it's time to show your true skills. In the demigod realm, Bufang had spent a lot of effort to cultivate the divine flame, which had fused with 3,000 laws and reached perfection. Moreover, this perfection was different from the perfected laws of ordinary god emperors. It was derived from the laws of the fallen heaven gods. They were the essence, not the dregs. The stronger one was, the purer the power of the laws would be. This was the consensus of everyone. For example, when the laws comprehended by a demigod were compared with those comprehended by a heaven god, the heaven god's laws were naturally purer. This was due to the difference in levels. Soul 13 stood in the distance, hovering in front of the skyscraper. His eyes were scarlet, and his forehead was glowing faintly. He looked at his fist in disbelief. The insect scales on his fist had shattered into pieces and were falling off bit by bit. Bufang's strength was not that of a heaven god, and Soul 13 could easily sense that. For a soul overlord, he could crush all existences below the soul overlord realm. However, he was defeated by a human. For soul demons, levels meant everything. He was a soul overlord, so all existences below the soul overlord realm must submit to him. The strict hierarchy kept the soul demons in good order. To soul overlords, the soul god was their master, the supreme god. If soul god wanted them to die, they had to die. But humans were different. There were always strange and eccentric people among humans. Whether it was in the past or now, there were always people who broke the rules. Their levels were not high, but they could challenge authority. There was a saying among soul demons: when you meet such eccentric humans, don't hold back and kill them as soon as possible. Otherwise, the soul demons might be killed in the future. Rumble, the insect's scales on his hand were recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. Soon, they were completely healed, and he was unscathed. As a soul overlord, his healing ability was far greater than before. However, it was already inconceivable that a mere god was able to injure him. Rumble. Soul 13 did not waste any more time. He had to kill Bufang at once. Only by killing Bufang would he feel at ease. He stepped on the building. The building immediately swayed unsteadily and was in imminent danger. The bricks of the building were completely shattered. As he punched out, it seemed to contain the power of thunder. The pressure that belonged to a soul overlord erupted, and it was wrapped in this punch. The color of heaven and earth changed, and half the sky turned pitch black. When a spirit overlord got serious, who could resist? On the other side, the humans and the soul demons fought madly. With the help of Stinky Tofu, the humans really suppressed the soul demons for a while. One soul demon after another spontaneously combusted after eating Stinky Tofu. The divine fire danced in Bufang's eyes. The next moment, Bufang stretched out a finger. 1 finger, 2 fingers, 3 fingers, 5 fingers shot out at the same time. Finally, the flame grew stronger. They seemed to have transformed into the 5 supreme laws of the universe. 50-50 was a good number for his fingers. The flames on each finger represented a type of law, a type of extremity. After becoming a god, what Bufang needed to do was to upgrade his godfire. The power of his divine sense spread and swept around him like a storm. A dazzling light burst out of the god of cooking's menu. Bufang's god of cooking's eye was also staring at the flame. He stared at it until his eyes turned red and tears were about to fall. Buzz, finally, the aura of the flame soared into the sky. Behind Bufang, 5 wheels of law were spinning. They resonated with the divine flame. The color of heaven and earth changed. Half of the sky turned black, which belonged to Soul 13's domain. Half of the sky, on the other hand, became colorful. After the colorful scene, there was a vast river of stars rolling backward. Every star was blinking in the river of stars, shining brightly. Everyone could not help looking up at the sky. Yuan Xiaobai did not think much of it. It was normal for any phenomenon to happen to Bufang. The seriously injured Divine Emperor, leaning against the door of the restaurant, was dumbfounded. This kind of phenomenon had only appeared in the records. This was a heaven illuminator. Rumble. The divine flame's aura kept rising, and its scorching temperature made people's hearts palpitate. Aimo watched with a complicated look in her eyes. Looking at Bufang, who was confronting Soul 13, she felt a little ashamed and ashamed. Under Soul 13's pressure, she was as weak as a worm. No wonder the immortal spirit empress died. Soul 13 was almost invincible. She knew that even if she had given the fruit of law to the crown princess, she would not have been able to become the hope of mankind like Bufang. She might even have been killed by Soul 13 in an instant. This soul demon had truly become a great demon. Her face burned when she thought of how she had questioned Bufang and asked for Bufang's fruit of law. I must have lost my mind. The crown princess is so weak. How can she shoulder such a great responsibility? The crown princess. Imo turned her head and looked at the crown princess. Suddenly, her pupils constricted. She found that when Xiao Yinyu looked up at the starry sky, her body was bursting with dazzling light. It was as if she was resonating with the thousands of stars in the sky. A heaven illuminator. The crown princess is actually illuminating the heavens. Isn't it said that only those who have comprehended the 5 supreme laws of the universe can illuminate the heavens and break through to the God realm? Could all this be because of Bufang? The heaven illuminator is created by Bufang, and the crown princess is affected by it and benefited from it. Imo wept with joy. At least, the crown princess did not let the immortal spirit empress down. The crown princess's change also attracted the attention of many people. Many people were happy that another genius was about to be born among the human race. The soul demons, of course, would not allow this to happen. Several numbered soul demons sped toward Xiao Yinyu. They were going to crush the last hope of mankind. Immortal energy surged out of Amo's body. She would not allow the soul demons to get close to her. She had wanted to live with the crown princess's help, but now she knew that if the soul demons won, she would not be able to live. A sword light swept across heaven and earth. Gold armor flew over on his sword, pushed back 3 numbered soul demons, and protected Xiao Yinyu, who was breaking through. His cultivation base was extremely strong, and he was considered one of the top god kings. The Titan Crown Prince had gone mad from the killing. Even though he was coughing up blood, he did not retreat. Fight, fight, fight. At this moment, all that was left in his mind was his fighting spirit and the stench of stinky tofu. Rumble! The heaven illuminator disappeared. Bufang opened his eyes. Before him, Soul 13 was approaching. Crack! Crack! In the next moment, Soul 13's hand was covered with insect scales and turned into a sharp knife. He slashed down with the knife, intending to cut Bufang in half. Bufang took a deep breath. Then, he clenched his fist and crushed the flame in his hand. A rumbling sound rang out. The flame darted and began to cover Bufang's body. The silver flame spread in an instant. In a flash, Bufang turned into a man of fire. The dragon bone knife, the vermilion robe, the white tiger heaven stove, the black turtle constellation wok, the Qilin transmigration ladle, all the god of cooking sets were unleashed. At this moment, Bufang made his appearance. Moreover, the flame covered his god of cooking set, which actually complemented each other. The surface of the dragon bone kitchen knife was covered with a layer of flame, and the vermilion robe had turned into a flaming robe. The black turtle constellation wok was burning over his head, and the white tiger stove was splashing flames under his feet. He held the knife in his left hand and the ladle in his right. His bare skin was also covered with flames. At this moment, except for the god of cooking's eye, Bufang's whole body was shrouded in flames. It was as if Bufang had turned into an ancient god of fire. "You're just playing tricks." Soul 13's face was cold. He did not want to talk nonsense. With a slash, the power of sin spread. The insect scales covered and stacked on top of each other. As the slender knife approached Bufang, it suddenly became extremely thick and heavy, stacking layer by layer, turning into a heavy machete. You and the others were so shocked by this aura that they could not even open their eyes. Bufang's god of cooking's eye flashed. In his eyes, the 3 red dots on Soul 13's body were as dazzling as the moon in the night. He raised the flaming dragon bone kitchen knife. It collided with the heavy machete. Bam! A tremendous force exploded out. Bufang was pushed back by the knife. Flames sprouted from the knife. Soul 13 pressed down on Bufang, who tried his best to resist. He flew out of the Luo family's skyscraper and fell to the ground. Bufang stamped his foot on the ground, causing it to explode. Out of the skyscraper, the ground was as fragile as tofu. Bam! 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 Bufang kept retreating. You're too weak. You're as weak as a clumsy pig. Boom! He swung the machete fiercely. In an instant, Bufang was sent flying away. Knife energy swept out and sent Bufang flying backward. Shrouded in divine flame, Bufang retreated at high speed like a fireball. Everywhere he passed, everything was burned black. Suddenly, a whistling sound rang out. The flames approached at high speed. Bufang held the dragon bone kitchen knife with one hand and swung it down. The kitchen knife of affliction. Did a pig provoke you? Why do you look down on a pig? Bufang's faint voice rang out. He swung the knife back. This time, he made 99,999 slashes. The power was peerless. A clanging sound rang out, and sparks flew in all directions. Go! Bufang pressed his knife against Soul 13's insect-scaled machete, and with a skillful force, he raised the machete high into the air as if he was drawing a Tai Chi diagram. Soul 13 stretched out his arm, and the red dot in his armpit shone as bright as the sun. If I don't strike now, when? The ladle in his other hand slapped out. It hit Soul 13's armpit. Crack! A soft, crisp sound rang out, but it was not loud. Soul 13, however, was stunned. The pain spread from his armpit and numbed half of his body, causing the corner of his mouth to twitch. What's going on? Shrouded in flames, Bufang's eyes lit up. It seems to work. Although Soul 13 had few weaknesses, it was enough. I'll hit your armpit, Bufang scolded. Again? Soul 13 did not know why he felt that pain, but he did not want to experience it again. So, he clamped his armpit tightly. However, he was wrong. This was because Bufang's ladle did not hit his armpit this time. Instead, it hit his eyes. Soul 13 closed his eyes subconsciously. The eye on his forehead flashed with a brilliant light. Bufang felt a sense of crisis. So, I'll hit your armpit again, Bufang shouted again. Soul 13's body trembled. He clamped his armpit tightly and covered his eyes. Do you think I'm stupid? How could I hit the same thing twice? However, neither his armpit nor his eyes were attacked. Soul 13 froze. The next moment, he felt a chill run down his spine. The ladle cut through the air with a tearing sound, and the scorching flame burned everything. From the bottom to the top, the ladle slammed into Soul 13's lower body. The air seemed to freeze at this moment. For a moment, Soul 13 heard two beautiful sounds of himself breaking out of his shell. One was the sound of insect scales breaking, and the other, what was that? Chapter 1580. The Qilin Transmigration Ladle, covered in silver flames, drew a beautiful arc in the air as Bufang swung it. Then, from the bottom to the top, it hit the weakness of Soul 13's lower body. That was the spot that the god of cooking's eye had seen, and it was also the most suitable spot for Soul 13, an ingredient. Soul 13 never thought that Bufang would do such a shameless thing. What happened to attacking the eyes and armpits? Why isn't he playing according to common sense? Bam! Soul 13's expression changed. The pain did not only affect his flesh but also went deep into his soul, making him shiver all over. He felt so uncomfortable that he almost fell from the cloud. He bent his body in the air for an unknown amount of time before he slowly came to a stop. His eyes were fixed on Bufang, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. This damned chef must be cut into pieces. Shrouded in the divine flame, Bufang looked like a god of fire walking out of the depths of the universe, coquettish and coquettish. Holding a kitchen knife in one hand and a ladle in the other, he waved them, sending sparks flying in all directions. An ordinary person's scalp would go numb. Bufang narrowed his eyes. A soul overlord was, after all, a soul overlord. Even if his weakness was seen through, he would not be knocked down so easily. His ladle had hit Soul 13's weakness and was even attached to it by the divine flame. However, it did not cause too much damage to him. The insect's scale armor that was split open quickly healed. In fact, he never thought that he would be able to defeat a soul overlord so easily, especially a heaven god soul overlord. Soul 13 sucked in a cold breath, shivering in midair. Finally, his killing intent overflowed. The wings on his back flapped, and he flew across the void in a flash. Bufang had found his weakness, but he did not have the means to completely break through it. After a few exchanges, Soul 13 was a little impatient. Buzz, Soul 13 threw out a palm. The power of sin gathered. Among the 7 sins, the power of gluttony surged out like thick ink, blotting out the sky. Then, it turned into a palm and slapped Bufang. Bam! That palm turned into an incomparably huge palm. He swung it down from the sky. The black turtle constellation walk spun above Bufang's head, blocking the palm strike. A clanging sound was heard. It was like collapsing ink. The entire ground turned pitch black. The palm exploded, and the ground caved in deeply. Bufang, who was at the center of the palm, only felt a heavy force pressing down on him, causing his face to turn slightly pale. That familiar feeling, that familiar pressure, it was the same pressure he felt from the heavenly god's palm. The two of them were exactly the same. Kacha kacha, the ground exploded, and a shocking ravine appeared. Broken rocks and cracks were everywhere. It was a ghastly sight. Soul 13 hovered in midair. He did not look at Bufang's position. The energy between his eyebrows was gathering rapidly. Then, a beam of light shot out from between his eyebrows, a loud and clear phoenix cry resounded. Behind Soul 13, a pitch-black phoenix spread its wings and soared into the sky. Its sonorous cry seemed to break through the 9 heavens. The moment the phoenix cry rang out, Princess Xiao Yanyu, who was on the battlefield, was startled. She turned her head to look at the phoenix that was burning with pitch-black flames. The Lord of the Phoenix Nest? Imo murmured inwardly. The Lord of the Phoenix and the Empress of Immortal Spirit had fought Soul 13 together. Unfortunately, the Empress had died, and there had been no news of the Lord of the Phoenix. Now, it seemed that the Lord of the Phoenix had been contaminated like the Dragon Emperor, and had become a soul demon. This was not good news for them. Nor was it good news for all mankind. Soul 13 stepped on the phoenix's head, narrowed his eyes, and pointed straight at Bufang. "Kill that human!" Soul 13 instructed the Lord of Phoenixes. The Lord of the Phoenix's eyes were scarlet, and her whole body was burning with black flames. Like a madman, she rushed madly toward the billowing black smoke on the ground. Her sharp claws swooped down from the 9 heavens like a goshawk, and grabbed a vole in the ground. Boom! The ground exploded. The Lord of the Phoenix spread her wings and soared into the sky. Her claws were clutching the black turtle constellation walk, which was hovering over Bufang's head. Bufang took a step forward. Then, he leaped high into the air and landed on the phoenix's claws. Holding the phoenix's claws, he slowly moved upward. The fluffy feathers of the phoenix fluttered and tickled her skin. Bufang furrowed his brows. He felt a great pressure. In fact, although Bufang had broken through to the god realm, his strength was still too weak. He could probably only fight a half-step heaven god, and this was because he had comprehended 5 supreme laws of the universe. If it weren't for this, he wouldn't even be able to fight against the god emperor. Even if he saw through her weakness, he did not have the corresponding strength to give her a thunderous blow. Bufang flipped over and landed on the phoenix's back. The flaming phoenix soared into the sky. This was the Lord of the Phoenix, who was a god emperor. Just like the Dragon Emperor that Bufang had encountered before, this Lord of the Phoenix was even stronger. Bufang and the Flaming Phoenix were entangled in midair, going back and forth. Grabbing the Qilin Transmigration Ladle, Bufang kept hitting the Phoenix's head. The Qilin Transmigration Ladle was so powerful that it could shatter Sol 13's insect scales. It should be noted that even a God Emperor would find it difficult to shatter Sol 13's defense with a full blow. Every time Lord Phoenix was hit, he felt severe pain. The aura of the Qilin in the ladle put great pressure on him. Sol 13 watched with a gloomy expression. Finally, the Lord of the Phoenix fell from the sky and smashed hard on the ground. With a bang, a shocking explosion rang out, and rubble rolled out in all directions. Trash, Sol 13 cursed, his eyes cold. In the ruins, dragging the Lord of the Phoenix's head, Bufang walked step by step out of the ruins. The divine flame enveloped his body, greatly improving Bufang's strength and fighting prowess. Sol 13's face was gloomy as he looked at Bufang, who was walking out of the ruins. The next moment, he raised his hand. Buzz in his hand, a stream of energy that seemed to emerge from the chaos shot out. It was the energy of a heaven god. Bufang leaned slightly to one side. He dodged the energy blast in an instant. However, Sol 13's target was not Bufang, but the Lord of the Phoenix behind Bufang. Bang! Black energy seeped into the Lord of the Phoenix's body. The next moment, the Lord of the Phoenix's body swelled, as if it could not bear the power. Like a balloon filled with too much water, it began to twist and swell. Bufang turned his head and looked at the swelling phoenix. His pupils constricted. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion took place. The Lord of the Phoenix's body completely exploded. It was as if a God Emperor had self-detonated. When the immortal Spirit Empress chose to self-detonate, she had seriously injured Sol 13, and it took him a long time to recover. Today, Sol 13 wanted to let Bufang feel the impact of a self-detonation. Boom! Boom! It was as if a nuclear bomb had exploded. Sol 13's figure sped away in a flash, out of the range of the explosion. With the ground as the center, terrible energy spread in all directions. Even the rubble was ground to pieces by the energy. It was a catastrophic explosion of destruction. Heaven and earth fell silent because of it. The light of the explosion made the world as bright as day. Whether it was the soul demons or the humans, they all stopped and looked at the scene in horror. The fluctuation in the energy made the humans' hair stand on end. The Xiai Divine Emperor, leaning against the door of the restaurant, had a dull look in his eyes. That's the self-detonation of an emperor expert. How could Bufang survive such an explosion? Sol 13 sneered in midair. He applauded himself for being so quick-witted. I can't believe that stinky chef dares to trick me. Even now, my soul still throbs from time to time, and I feel very uncomfortable. In that case, I'll give him a taste of his own medicine. Isn't the Lord of Phoenix the divine beast of mankind? I'll let him give you a destructive blow. The energy of the explosion slowly dissipated. The Lord of Phoenix's body was gone. After all, he had self-detonated, so his fleshly body could no longer exist. A huge, round, bottomless pit was blasted into the ground. There seemed to be gray smoke lingering in the pit. Around the pit, rubble was rolling down. At the edge, Bufang sat there with his head bowed. He was panting slightly. The divine flame on him had dissipated. The vermilion robe on his body was also tattered. The vermilion robe, which had lost its artifact spirit, had lost its previous domineering dominance. However, the vermilion robe was slowly recovering. Bufang looked up. There was golden light swirling in his eyes. He looked straight ahead with the god of cooking's eye. There, the Lord of Phoenix's broken soul was drifting aimlessly. Bufang raised his hand and beckoned, and the broken soul flew toward him. The vermilion robe produced a strange suction force, which sucked the broken soul of the phoenix into it. The recovery ability of the vermilion robe instantly increased, and before long, it was restored to its original appearance. Bufang, on the other hand, only looked a little more wretched. The vermilion robe's artifact spirit was the vermilion bird. The phoenix and the vermilion bird had the same origin, so its broken energy could be fused into the vermilion robe. The pit was huge. Standing at its edge, Bufang looked as small as an ant. But Bufang did not care. He looked up at Sol 13 in the sky with a serious face. He felt that things were getting tricky. Even the 5 laws of the universe and the divine flame could not do anything to him. Bufang did not know how to deal with him. Host, please pay attention. Do you want to take the God's only realm cooking test? The system's serious voice rang in Bufang's mind. At first, Bufang could only hear his own breathing and the whistling of the wind in the pit. The system's voice was so obvious when it appeared. It was as if it was his last life-saving straw. Bufang's eyes lit up. As long as he passed the usual realm test, his cultivation base would break through. He would reach the peak of the God's only realm. In that case, he might be able to put up a fight against Sol 13. After all, the stronger he was, the more obvious the effect of the 5 supreme laws of the universe would be. Then, the god of cookings I would not be so useless. He exhaled. Bufang felt that everything around him had quieted down. In that case, he had no other choice. Do you want to take the cooking test? The system asked. Yes, Bufang said. As soon as he finished speaking, Bufang felt a strange force envelop him. He felt that his spiritual consciousness was being pulled into a strange space. In reality, Sol 13's eyes narrowed as he looked at Bufang, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground with his head bowed. He could clearly sense Bufang's condition. This chef actually chose to break through when facing me? Isn't he courting death? How could he, Sol 13, let that chef break through so easily? The Black Turtle Constellation Wok, the Dragon Bone Kitchen Knife, the Chilan Transmigration Ladle, and the White Tiger Stove hovered around Bufang. Judging from Bufang's posture, was he going to cook? Was he going to cook in the middle of a fight? Who the hell are you looking down on? Sol 13's eyes turned scarlet. The lines on his body squirmed as he grew taller and taller. His body, which was originally an ordinary human, suddenly turned into a giant that was tens of thousands of feet tall. Then, his mouth opened so wide that it seemed to be able to swallow a star. Sol 13 growled at Bufang as a suction force emerged from his mouth. The terrible suction force seemed to want to swallow Bufang and everything around him into its mouth in the Luo family's skyscraper. In the restaurant, the door of the restaurant suddenly opened. A fat figure slowly walked out with cat-like step. Lord Go yawned. He glanced sideways and saw Sol 13, who was tens of thousands of feet tall. Then, his exquisite dog Po reached out in front of him. Suddenly, everything around him seemed to pause. The law of time spread. Even Sol 13, who was a soul overlord, was affected by Lord Go's law of time. Just like that, Lord Go walked gracefully with his cat-like steps and came in front of Sol 13, who had transformed into a giant. Plop! The law of time dissipated. The huge suction force from Sol 13's mouth made Lord Go's dog flesh tremble. Oh! Sol 13's pupils constricted, as if he didn't expect that a dog would appear in front of him. The dog was holding a heaven god's bone. It hovered in front of Sol 13. Then Lord Go stuffed the heaven god's bone into his mouth, and closed his mouth with a crack. The heaven god's bone was crushed in an instant. Chapter 1581. Oh? A fat black dog. Sol 13's enormous body blotted out the sky, and he was even larger than the Titan Divine Emperor. His head seemed to be about to break through the clouds and rush into the starry sky. However, he still saw the dog. It was the black dog that suddenly appeared in front of him. What a fat dog! Sol 13 narrowed his eyes, and a rumbling sound came from his huge mouth. This was his voice. The suction force in his mouth did not weaken. It was still erupting, trying to swallow the fat Lord Go. In fact, to Soul 13, the black dog was about the size of a butt, and it was not even enough to fill the gaps between his teeth. This was the horror of gluttony soul overlords. They could devour everything, and they were somewhat similar to Tao-Tai. Lord Go? In front of the Luo family's skyscraper, you narrowed her eyes slightly. She was standing on the top floor of the skyscraper, her long black dress fluttering in the wind. It's useless even if the Lord Go makes a move. This Soul 13 is already a soul overlord. The Heaven God's bone is useless against him. The Xiai Divine Emperor smiled bitterly. He was not very optimistic about the Lord Go's chances. He felt that the only means the Lord Go could use to deal with Soul 13 was the strange Heaven God's bone. However, as soon as he finished speaking, the Lord Go bit the Heaven God's bone and shattered it with a crunch. As soon as this scene appeared, everyone was stunned. The Xiai Divine Emperor sat up with wide eyes as if he was suffering from a serious illness. What's going on? What is the Lord Go going to do? Why did he crush the Heaven God's bone? Boom! Boom! The battle between the human camp and the soul demon camp was in full swing. Because of the stinky tofu, the human side had a slight advantage. However, the human experts were still not strong enough to deal with the numbered soul demons. Perhaps they were just resisting by relying on the stinky tofu. Now, both the human side and the soul demon side were actually waiting for the main battlefield to turn out. That battle would determine the final outcome of this war. As long as the gluttony soul overlord could spare a hand, no one on the human side could resist him. Kacha Kacha. The heavenly deity's bone shattered, crushed by the Lord Go's bite. He chewed for a while. The residue of the heavenly god's bone turned into a beam of light and flowed into the Lord Go's mouth like water. The fat on Lord Go's body was shaking. Underneath, Bufang, who was sitting cross-legged, slowly opened his eyes. He glanced in the direction of the Lord Go and exhaled deeply. Bufang was slightly startled, as if he was also puzzled by the Lord Go's attack. But now these were not what Bufang wanted to think about. What he wanted to do now was to do a good job in the cooking test. Only by completing the dish test would his cultivation base break through, and only then would he have a chance to fight against a spirit master. Therefore, Bufang's heart sank. Around him, the god of cooking sets floated in midair. Bufang's eyes narrowed slightly. As soon as he got into the state of cooking, Bufang paid no attention to what was going on outside and only focused on cooking. Swish, he waved the dragon bone kitchen knife. Then, Bufang began his test. Soul 13 squinted at the fat dog. No matter how hard he tried, all the gravel around him was sucked into his mouth. His deep breaths even caused a storm to gather between heaven and earth, affecting the balance of energy in this part of the world. But the dog was still indifferent. There's something strange about this dog. But does it think it dares to fight me just because it ate a heavenly god's bone? Are there so many dogs who overestimate themselves nowadays? Soul 13's eyes focused, and the scarlet light in them grew brighter. Then, he slowly raised his paw. It was a paw covered with insect scales, which were condensed from the essence of the soul demon's energy and were originally one with it. They were incomparably tough, comparable to the divine weapons in the universe. Rumble. The 100,000 feet tall Soul 13 waved his paw, which was as huge as a mountain, blotting out the sky and slapping down toward Lord Go. Lord Go crushed the heavenly god's bone with his teeth. Then, he burped and furrowed his brows in disgust. Bufang boy's sweet and sour ribs are still the best, Lord Go sighed. I think dog meat might be more delicious, Soul 13 said coldly. As soon as his voice rang out, the paw approached in a flash, bringing with it a terrible aura and a creepy pressure. Rumble. Lord Go jerked his head up, his eyes bursting with sharpness. Dog meat. Lord Go sneered. In the face of Soul 13's paw, all the dog meat on Lord Go's body shivered, starting from his chubby butt and piling up in front of his body. Finally, he opened his mouth wide, and a mighty energy seemed to be brewing in his mouth. When the energy had been brewing to the extreme, it burst out in an uproar. Facing the huge paw that blotted out the sky, Lord Go opened his mouth and let out a bark. Woof! At first, it sounded like a dog's bark, but if one listened carefully, it sounded like a dragon's roar or a phoenix's cry. It was as if a peerless savage beast had awakened, bringing with it a terror that made the whole universe tremble. Bam! Bam! Soul 13's huge scarlet eyes constricted. He was horrified to find that his paw could not fall any further. It was pushed away by the barking energy coming out of Lord Go's mouth. How could a dog bark resist the paw of a soul overlord? He was a soul overlord. In the human chaotic universe, he was equivalent to a heaven god level expert. How could this dog block his attack? Buzz, blood-colored lines spread across Lord Go's body. Lord Go's body instantly became slender. Slowly, a ripping sound rang out. Time seemed to stop. Lord Go bared his teeth, looking very fierce. Bam! Like a cannonball, he shot out and appeared in front of the paw in a flash. Then, he raised his exquisite paw and slapped it hard. A loud rumble rang out. Soul 13 broke free from the shackles of the law of time, and his eyes burst into a ferocious light. The little paw collided with Soul 13's paw, which was as huge as a mountain. Soul 13's mountain-like body shook violently, and he inadvertently took a step back. That one step caused the ground to cave in. Lord Go's body also flew backward in midair like a meatball. He steadied himself. Lord Go bared his teeth, and energy seemed to be escaping from his mouth. It seemed that the power of the heaven god's bone was constantly fusing with him. Soul 13 froze. You froze. The Xiai Divine Emperor, who did not think highly of Lord Go, was also stunned. The paw of a soul overlord collided with Lord Go, and they were evenly matched. How was this possible? Had Lord Go become a heaven god? How could this dog be a heaven god? This didn't make sense. He was just a high-grade god before, not even a god king. How could he become a heaven god now? How could he be so unreasonable? Are the people and dogs in this restaurant all freaking monsters? The Xiai Divine Emperor's heart trembled. Besides, how could this dog become a heaven god in an era where heaven gods did not appear? Unless the Xiai Divine Emperor froze. His pupils narrowed and he sucked in a cold breath. This dog is as annoying as the chef. Soul 13 turned over his palm, which was covered with cracks and densely packed lines. His eyes burst into a ferocious light, and he felt incredulous. This dog had actually shattered his insect scale armor. Buzz, Soul 13 moved again. He clenched his paw into a fist and threw it out again. He had underestimated his enemy. He did not expect that a dog could burst out with such fighting prowess. It was even more unreliable than the chef. In that case, he would smash everything. Bam! The punch came with unparalleled power and a terrible aura. It was so powerful that it seemed to sweep across the sky and turn the world upside down. It was as if all the energy in the world had been sucked away. Die. Soul 13's body was tens of thousands of feet tall, and his eyes were even bigger than Lord Go's. However, it still locked onto Lord Dog's body. With a murderous aura, it ferociously smashed its fist down. Time paused again. Lord Go sped forward like a cannonball, barking and slapping his paw forward. Bam! The collision this time made Soul 13 a little crazy. This made Soul 13 somewhat mad. Why was the law of time so irritating? Boom! Lord Go flew backward and smashed hard on the ground, causing it to explode. Soul 13, on the other hand, staggered back several steps. The two collided again, and they were equally matched. Soul 13 stopped devouring everything. The Titan Divine Dynasty's Titan incarnation was very strong, but it was too clumsy. Facing a nimble dog, it did not have an advantage. So, Soul 13's body shrank. Then, he transformed into his human form. The wings on his back fluttered. Then, he shot out like a beam of silver light. The power of sin was gathering in his hand. He floated to the spot where Lord Go had been smashed into the ground, then threw punch after punch at Lord Go. The ground was instantly bombarded repeatedly, shattering and trembling unceasingly. A beam of black light shot up as Lord Go's paw slashed across Soul 13's face. A claw mark was left on Soul 13's face. "It's the law of time again," Soul 13 was furious. "Damn it! Damn it! Damn it!" Soul 13 bellowed. He sensed an uneasy aura from the black dog. It made him more and more irritable. Buzz, his figure sped forward like a stream of light. In a flash, he appeared in front of Lord Go. The Soul Overlord's speed was too fast. Rumble! Before Lord Go could react, he was knocked flying backward and smashed hard on the ground. In the distance, all the spectators sucked in their breath. The Shy Divine Emperor was dumbfounded. He stared blankly at the spot where Lord Go had fallen. There seemed to be something dying there. Time was flowing backward. Soul 13 focused his eyes. Even through the insect's scales, he felt his hair stand on end. This feeling, the fat all over Lord Go's body was shivering. Then, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, his fat melted like ice cubes. Even Lord Go had become thin from being fat. Moreover, he was not just a normal thin man. From 4 paws on the ground, he stood up straight. The power of law turned into specks of light, swirling around Lord Go's body. Then, his dog form faded and turned into a human. It was a human whose face could not be seen clearly, but one could see that his body was very well proportioned and perfect. Lord Go has turned into a human? At the top of the Luo family's skyscraper, you sucked in a cold breath. The Shy Divine Emperor was still in a daze. Hades Era's mouth was wide open, and his jaw was about to drop to the ground. Damn it! That mangy dog can turn into a human? Bufang's eyelids twitched as he was cooking. Even though he did not pay attention to what was going on outside, he had a strange feeling in his heart. He opened his eyes and looked up at Lord Go, who had turned from a dog into a human in the sky. A surging aura rushed out of Lord Go's body, and the law of time was boiling. Bufang felt that the aura was somewhat familiar. It was the aura of a heaven god. Chapter 1582. Buzz Bufang felt as though he had entered a new world. This place was like a kitchen isolated from the rest of the world. This was the test given to Bufang by the system. It was a test to upgrade dishes. This was actually a routine. Bufang's cultivation didn't need to be like other people, who needed to level up slowly. Every time he reached a new realm, as long as he could pass the dish test, he would have a great leap. Bufang was quite familiar with this point. However, although he was familiar with this test, Bufang didn't dare to relax for even a moment. If he failed the test, he would be punished, and it could even put Bufang in a hopeless situation. That was why Bufang was serious about this advancement test. The system's serious voice echoed in his head, telling him some things to pay attention to. Finally, a light flashed in front of Bufang's eyes. Then, it was the cooking method of a dish. Host, please pay attention. The dish for the advancement test. Divine Fire Snail Rice Noodles. Host, please cook the required dish to advance. The system's serious voice sounded. Bufang didn't answer it. No doubt, this was a new dish. Bufang's mind was attracted by this dish. At this moment, what he needed to do was cook this dish. Bufang's face was a little strange. Snail rice noodles. This was a dish from Earth, but this dish had something strange. Just like the stinky tofu, this dish was famous for its smell. The smell it exuded was the same as the stinky tofu's. Perhaps only people who knew how to taste could understand the stench of snail rice noodles. What a coincidence! The system's dish for the advancement test was actually snail rice noodles. He narrowed his eyes. Bufang's mind flickered. He began to prepare the ingredient. To make an authentic snail rice noodles, he needed many ingredients. Among them, the selection of snails was very important. There were also some other ingredients. In fact, this dish ate the ingredients and the soup base. The snail rice noodles were prepared by the system. This was good news for Bufang. With a thought, a piece of dragon ridge rib appeared in his hand, and he cut it into a thin piece. The snails were provided by the system. There was a pot full of snails in it. With a shake of his hand, he tossed out a ball of silver divine flame. He controlled the divine fire and sent it into the pot, causing the divine fire to cover the snails. The moment the snail worm sensed the divine fire, not only was it not burned to ashes by the flames, but it seemed to be bathing in water as it breathed in and out the divine fire. All the impurities were expelled. The impurities in the snails greatly affected the entire dish. Perhaps this was the reason why this dish was called Divine Fire Snail Rice Noodle. The other ingredients, such as the secret pickled bamboo shoots, pickled cabbage, pickled radish, etc., as well as some seasonings and herbs, were all prepared. Then, he placed them on small plates. With the black turtle constellation wok in his hand, he heated the wok and poured some oil into it. After preparing the two-colored bean curd, Bufang waited for the oil to boil before pouring it into the wok. TSS in the wok, the bean curd rolled and slowly became crispy. He took out the oil from the fried bean curd. From the heaven and earth farmland, he took out a can of abyssal chili sauce that had been hidden for a long time. After being improved by Bufang, he made chili oil. Then, he began to make the soup base. He stewed the dragon bone soup and prepared the soup. On the other side, he began to cook the snails. First, he fried the pickled bamboo shoots and pickled cabbage. After that, he removed the wok and put them on a plate. In another wok, he began to cook the snails. He added the chopped purple garlic, sun mother ginger, and other ingredients. After that, he added the snails and began to stir-fry them. After adding water, he poured in the bone soup to boil. The snails in the wok were boiling, rolling, and spitting out the divine fire, which was very dazzling. Next, Bufang needed to control the temperature of the snail rice noodle. Now, he was making the soup base, and the taste of the soup base would determine the taste of this dish. Bufang's divine sense surged out. He didn't dare to be distracted. It fused into the wok, and began to sense the changes of the ingredients in the wok. When the snail meat fell from the wok, it flowed into the wok. At this time, Bufang poured the chili oil that he had prepared into the wok. Gurgle, gurgle. Bufang looked at the boiling snail rice noodle in the wok, and his eyes suddenly narrowed. This dish, at this point, was almost ready. He took out the noodles. The noodles of the snail rice noodle had to be coarse, so that the snail rice noodle would taste sour and refreshing. He took out a blue and white porcelain bowl. Bufang poured the soup base into the bowl. The soup base was covered with a layer of chili oil. It was bright red and it looked very appetizing. He added the smooth noodles, placed the fried dragon in it, and added the other ingredients and ingredient. The most important was the pickled bamboo shoots, because the pickled bamboo shoots were the essence of the snail rice noodle. When Bufang took out a white cloth and wiped off the oil around the porcelain bowl, rays of light suddenly burst out from the porcelain bowl. It was so dazzling that people couldn't even open their eyes. A sour stench filled the air, causing Bufang to raise his eyebrows. Compared to stinky tofu, the taste of the snail rice noodle was even better. When the two stinky tofu combined, they would be invincible. However, unlike stinky tofu, the snail rice noodle looked very good. Just looking at it would arouse one's appetite, and one could not help but want to eat it. The bright red soup base and the fragrant papillion steak looked perfect, except for the stench. Rumble. The aura around Soul 13 kept shaking. His cold eyes were fixed on the figure in the distance, which was slowly rising to its feet. Yes, it was a figure. The black dog had actually turned into a human in front of him and under the watchful eyes of the crowd. Of course, the key was not the black dog's transformation. There was nothing unusual about it. As long as it was a fierce beast or a divine beast with a certain level of cultivation, it could transform into a human. However, this person exuded an aura that made his heart palpitate. This was very unusual. It was the aura of a heaven god in this world. Yes, it was definitely the aura of a heaven god. Soul 13 could not be mistaken. After all, he was always on guard against the heaven god of this world. He did not expect that this heaven god was actually a dog. I'll kill him before he completely transforms into a heaven god. Soul 13 moved. His sharp claws tore through the air, and the power of sin condensed in his hand. Then, he threw it at Lord Go. The speed was so fast that the void shattered in an instant. Lord Go had turned into a human figure. It was the figure of a man. A gentle and magnetic voice rang out. Lord Go, I seem to have thought of something incredible. Bufong boy, you'd better do your best. Lord Go said. Then, he seemed to sigh. The next moment, he raised his hand, which was covered with the law of time, which seemed to emit a bright light. Then, he pointed a finger at the black power of sin that was shooting toward him. Boom! Like a punctured balloon, the power of sin dissipated in an instant. He's really a heaven god. A modern-day heaven god. Soul 13's pupils constricted. From this figure, he sensed a faint connection with the chaos space. He had learned that all the modern-day heaven gods had entered the chaos space. Therefore, even if the soul demons invaded this world, these heaven gods would not appear. However, he felt that this statement did not make sense. After all, this universe was the base of the heaven god. Once all the living beings in this universe were wiped out, their power would be affected. Therefore, it was impossible for the heaven gods to stand by and do nothing. Now, this modern-day heaven god had finally appeared. However, it was too late. He, Soul 13, had long become a soul overlord. He could even fight a modern-day heaven god. If he could not defeat him, he could just run away. Soul 13's pupils constricted. Suddenly his eyes narrowed. His vision blurred. The figure of Lord Go appeared in front of him. He threw a punch at him. The punch seemed to have become the center of the world, and everything was attracted to it. This was the power of a heaven god. Every move he made could cause heaven and earth to change. Boom! Soul 13 did not flinch. Instead, he raised his fist and threw a punch. Their fists collided. Boom! 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 Then, the two of them seemed to turn into two beams of light, one silver and the other white, that shot up into the sky from the ground, broke through the sky and rushed into the starry sky. The battle between the two was very terrifying. Just a little bit of their aura was enough to cause the stars to explode. The humans were cheering. The heaven god had finally appeared. They were saved. Yu, on the other hand, had a stunned look in her eyes. Lord Go is a heaven god? How did Lord Go become a heaven god? The Xiai Divine Emperor was also dumbfounded. It turned out that the heaven god he had been looking forward to had been by his side all along. However, he did not see him. The humans cheered for the heaven god's rescue. Yu and the others, on the other hand, were shocked by Lord Go's identity. Hades' Era kept murmuring, his eyes dull. That mangy dog is actually a heaven god, and he's a modern-day heaven god who controls the law of time. Could he be heaven god Time? But that mangy dog is a heaven god. How could he end up in a corner of the netherworld? Why is his strength so weak? Or maybe, Lord Go is the reincarnation of a heaven god? That can't be right. A heaven god is not stupid. Why would he reincarnate into a dog? Hades' Era was dumbfounded. It was as if the richest man in the country had suddenly appeared among his classmates. How terrifying! Bam! The battle in the starry sky had almost reached its climax. Soul 13 and the figure transformed from Lord Go were locked in a fierce battle. Soul 13 was very excited. This modern-day heaven god was incomplete, and his strength was not perfect. Moreover, he could not hold on for long. Although he did not know the reason, this was his chance. If he could devour a human heaven god, his realm would be completely stabilized, and he might even be able to break through to a higher level. Greed, desire, excitement, all kinds of emotions erupted. It made him want nothing more than to chop this black dog into pieces and devour it piece by piece. That delicious taste, that fragrant smell, oh! Suddenly Soul 13 paused. He found that there seemed to be a fragrance lingering in his nostrils. It was a real fragrance, not something he had imagined. This smell, Soul 13 jerked his head down and looked down. There, the chef sitting cross-legged on the ground had finished cooking. A rich aroma wafted out from the chef's position. Gulp. Soul 13 unconsciously swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Bam! While he was lost in thought, the figure transformed from Lord Go approached in a flash. The law of time turned into a river of time and space that flowed backward and smashed hard on Soul 13's body. It was a very powerful move. Soul 13 howled miserably. The insect's scales all over his body seemed to be on the verge of breaking and cracking. In the blink of an eye, he was smashed into a huge planet. With a loud boom, the huge star actually began to collapse and disintegrate. On the crumbling planet, Soul 13 stepped on the surface of a broken boulder and stared coldly at Lord Go. The space between his eyebrows split open, revealing a rolling eye. This is the eye of sin of us soul overlords. It is the source of our 7 sins. With this power, I grant you death. Soul 13 growled. Then, all the rubble on his body crumbled. In front of the eye, black and red energy was gathering. It was the power of sin, the power of gluttony that represented the realm of soul overlords. The gathering of this power seemed to cause the entire Chaosverse to grow restless and uneasy. The figure transformed from Lord Go looked up into the depths of the chaos space. He sighed. Then, the aura on his body began to weaken. Lord Go felt helpless. He wanted to kill Soul 13 in the short time he had to regain his heaven god power, but he did not expect that his strength would decline so badly. He could not kill Soul 13 now. Now it seemed that he would be killed instead. This was very uncomfortable. Soul 13 seemed to have noticed this as well. He could not stop laughing excitedly. He could already imagine the scene of this heaven god being devoured by him. It was so tempting that he could not help but drool. Slurp. Slurp, his saliva dripped. The eye on Soul 13's forehead suddenly burst into bright light. Go to hell. Buzz, it was as if a woman shrouded in darkness was screaming. In an instant, the black and red power of sin turned into a straight beam of light and shot toward the heaven god transformed from Lord Go. The beam of black and red light streaked across the sky in an instant. Wherever it passed through stars and caused them to explode. The sun and moon lost their light. The figure transformed from Lord Go stared expressionlessly at the beam of black and red light. Then, he sighed. This is bad, Lord Go murmured helplessly. Suddenly, just as the beam of black and red light was about to approach Lord Go, the void in front of Lord Go was torn apart. A silhouette slowly walked out of it. He held a blue and white porcelain bowl in one hand, and his blue hair was fluttering in the wind. Chapter 1583. The heaven god that Lord Go had transformed into was very strong, but his strength was constantly weakening. After all, this was not his original strength. He had awakened the heaven god's aura and means by biting the heaven god's bone. This method naturally had its drawbacks. Sensing the beam of light filled with the power of sin that Soul 13 shot toward him, the stars in the sky seemed to explode under the impact of the beam. The power of this move was too terrifying. The figure that Lord Go had transformed into felt that he might be in trouble. However, of course, there were other situations as well. Buzz, the void was torn apart. In front of the beam of light, a figure appeared without anyone noticing. Clad in a striped red and white vermilion robe, his vigorous hair fluttered in the wind, and his eyes shone like torches. In his hand was a steaming blue and white porcelain bowl, which no doubt contained delicious food. The appearance of such a figure in front of the figure that Lord Go had transformed into stunned everyone. Soul 13 raised his hand, in which the power of sin kept surging. Narrowing his eyes, he looked at Bufang, who stood in front of Lord Go, and twitched the corners of his mouth slightly. Reckless chef, you can die with that dog. The fact that a heaven god was weak was a pleasant surprise that he had never expected. If it was a heavenly deity at his peak, he could only turn around and run. He wouldn't be able to stay behind in the slightest. After all, a heaven god at his peak was not someone he could deal with now. Although he had become a soul overlord, every veteran heaven god was a veteran. How could they not have some tricks up their sleeves? However, the heaven god who had just appeared was not at his peak. In fact, with every minute and second that they fought, the heaven god's aura was weakening. Such a heaven god posed no threat to Soul 13 at all. Rumble! Soul 13 let out a long roar. It was an excited roar, and his tone contained his excitement and arrogance. A loud rumble rang out. The power of sin became even more powerful as it blasted out fiercely. The beam of light shot straight down and approached Bufang in an instant. Everything seemed to become quiet and slow at this moment. Bufang's expression was incomparably calm. Even when the sinful light beam approached his body, Bufang was not afraid at all. He did not even blink his eyes. His divine consciousness surged. Behind Bufang, the 5 supreme laws of the universe materialized into a wheel of law. Numerous discs floated and stacked behind him, and each law was like a star. The 5 stars shone resplendently as if they were illuminating the heavens. Bufang's body was wrapped in a strange power. Bam! The beam of sin hit Bufang's body. As it approached Bufang's body, it collided with the power of the 5 supreme laws of the universe. 5 types of law energy and 1 type of sin energy. The power of laws was the power of this chaotic universe, while the power of sin was the power of the soul demon universe. The collision of 2 different powers produced a terrifying reaction. Boom! A dazzling light burst out from the point of collision. The light was as bright as day, and it was as if the whole universe had been illuminated at this moment. In the capital of the Xiai divine dynasty, whether it was the fighting soul demons or the humans, they were all looking up at the sky in a daze. They could see the power that was seeping down from the starry sky. Their eyes were filled with only white. The pressure coming from their bodies belonged to soul overlords and heaven god. The Xiai divine emperor was dumbstruck. He had seen the last scene just now clearly. Bufang tore through space, appeared in front of the Lord Go, and helped the Lord Go block Soul 13's killing blow. Was it really so touching? Bufang sacrificed himself to block the attack for the Lord Go? How could Bufang, who was only a god, resist the power of sin? That was a confrontation of heaven god level powers. If a god were to intervene, he would probably be turned to ashes in an instant. There was no way he could block it. What Bufang did could only be described as touching. The Xiai divine emperor's face twitched. Is Soul 13 really so strong? The aura of the Lord Go is indeed that of a heaven god, and he might be heaven god time. There might be some secret behind the disappearance of the current heaven god, and the Lord Go might be the reincarnation of heaven god time. However, a newly reincarnated heaven god needs time to recover his strength. The Lord Go is too weak. You looked up at the sky. The bright white light soon began to fade. The sky gradually turned gray. In the universe, everything became clear. Soul 13 narrowed his eyes. The third eye on his forehead kept twitching, exuding a terrifying aura. That chef should be dead, right? It's impossible for him to survive such an attack. He sacrificed himself to block the attack for a dog. This chef is really capable. He had planned to deal with the chef after devouring the heaven god, but now it seemed that he didn't need to. Soul 13 grinned and flapped the wings on his back. Then, he focused his eyes. In the distance, the smoke and dust dissipated, revealing the scene there. With just a glance, Soul 13 felt a little incredulous. Bufang was not dead. He was standing where he was, unscathed. How is this possible? Soul 13 let out a shrill cry, feeling incredulous. Even the power of sin can't kill this chef? This is the power of sin from the 7 deadly sins. Bufang raised his head and exhaled a puff of white smoke. He was a little scared. Behind him, the 5 wheels of the supreme laws of the universe had disappeared, and he almost couldn't hold on any longer. Fortunately, he managed to block it. The main reason was that he had completed the advancement test. Bufang focused his eyes, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. Then, he met Soul 13's incredulous gaze. "I'll give you a bowl of noodles," Bufang said. The next moment, he flicked his finger. The divine fire snail noodle shot out and slowly sped toward Soul 13. A bowl of noodles? Everyone in the Xiaoyi divine dynasty saw the scene in the starry sky. They were clearly fighting, so how did it turn into a bowl of noodles? Everyone raised their heads and looked at it curiously. The blue and white porcelain bowl floated in the air. As it spun slowly, steam rose from the bowl, and a strange smell wafted out of it. It was a smell that could be described as stinky, but it could also be described as fragrant. It was very unique and alluring. As long as one sniffed it, it seemed to arouse the primitive desire in the depths of one's heart, making one want to find out the source of the fragrance. The fragrance drifted and filled the air. It was as if the whole Xiaoyi divine dynasty was enveloped in it. Soul 13's ferocious face froze. He narrowed his eyes and took a deep sniff of the smell. "It smells so good," he murmured. All the soul demons in the Xiaoyi divine dynasty were intoxicated by the smell. Each of them greedily took a deep breath, trying to capture the smell. The faces of the humans in the Xiaoyi divine dynasty were a little strange. The fall of the soul demons had given them a short break. They were panting and had strange expressions on their faces. The Titan Crown Prince, bathed in blood, looked up at the sky and sniffed. The stench was not as strong as that of the stinky tofu, but it contained an indescribable meaning. It was also a stinky dish. It was also a stinky dish like the stinky tofu? The Titan disciple's pupils constricted, and then an excited smile came over the corners of his mouth. It seems that this dish was developed by Owner Bu to deal with the soul demons. Damn soul demons, your doomsday is here. To humans, it was a stinky smell, so many humans covered their noses. But to soul demons, it was a fragrance, and they sniffed greedily. Soul 13 was intoxicated by the fragrance. Suddenly, he opened his eyes. He found that a bowl of noodles was floating in front of him. It was a bowl of steaming noodles. The red chili oil looked incomparably bright, whetting one's appetite. Papillion steak, seasoning, and so on it made the bowl of river snail rice noodles look very plump. It doesn't look good, but it smells so good. Looking at the bowl of river snail rice noodles, Soul 13's throat rolled up and down. The bowl of river snail rice noodles was like a gift from the devil, exuding temptation. His instinct as a soul overlord made it clear in his heart that he must refuse this bowl of river snail rice noodles. "I can't eat it. I can't eat it even if I'm beaten to death. Once I eat it, I may be doomed eternally. I can't eat it." Soul 13's eyes were scarlet, and the eyeball on his forehead was blinking. Desire and greed flowed through them. The light of the dish illuminated the whole universe. "I can't eat it. I can't eat it even if you beat me to death. I can't be tempted." Soul 13 clenched his teeth and frowned. In the distance, Bufang and Lord Go stood side by side. Both of them looked indifferently at Soul 13. Eat it. It's delicious. Bufang said lightly. Eat it. It's as delicious as sweet and sour ribs. Lord Go's magnetic voice rang through the starry sky. The voices of these two men were like the murmurs of demons, which instantly increased Soul 13's appetite. He was a gluttony soul overlord, and he could not control his appetite at all. He was so tempted by Bufang and Soul 13. He could not help it. Thud. He grabbed the bowl. I can't eat it. Soul 13's eyes widened, and they were bloodshot. Then, slurp, slurp. Slurp. Soul 13's insect scales turned into chopsticks, picked up the rice noodles, and stuffed them into his mouth. The way he ate made him look like a starving ghost who had been starving for tens of thousands of years. As he ate, his eyes widened as if they were about to burst into tears. He did not want to eat it, but why was it so delicious? Was this a human delicacy? Why was it so delicious? It was so delicious that he could not stop eating it. When he took a bite, he felt the river snail rice noodles bouncing in his mouth. When he took a bite, the delicious soup burst out with a flame-like spiciness. When he took a bite, he felt as if flames were burning his body from the inside out. All these feelings came together. There was only one emotion left. And that was pleasure. Slurp. Soul 13 jerked the bowl up. In one gulp, he drank all the remaining soup in the bowl. Then, flames began to rise from the inside to the outside of Soul 13's body. The silver flames were burning his body. The scorching sensation made him realize that something was wrong. Sure enough, despicable human. There's something wrong with your bowl of noodles. Soul 13's heart was filled with rage. He stared fixedly at Bufang in the distance. Bufang and Lord Go stood side by side, the corners of their mouths curling upward at the same time. Although Lord Go's face could not be seen, one could see his excitement at the moment. Kill him while he's sick, Lord Go's gentle and magnetic voice rang out. Bufang nodded. A bowl of river snail rice noodles might not be able to kill Soul 13. After all, he was a heaven god-level soul demon. However, just like stinky tofu could restrain a numbered soul demon, this river snail rice noodles should make Soul 13 feel uncomfortable as well. In that case, I'll take advantage of his discomfort and end the battle in one fell swoop. Bufang focused his eyes. With his hands clasped behind his back, his divine sense surged. Then, there seemed to be a rumbling sound. The 5 wheels of law appeared behind him once again. In addition to the 5 wheels of law, the divine flame around Bufang began to jump. Wisps of the power of law floated in the air, turning Bufang's body into a sea of law. Bufang was like a supreme god in the sea of law. He stepped out of the sea on the wave. Congratulations to the host for completing the promotion test. The promotion will now begin, the system's serious voice rang out in Bufang's mind. Then, the corners of Bufang's mouth curled upward slightly. Looking at Soul 13, he took a step forward. As soon as he took that step, his aura began to rise as if it was boiling. Bufang took his time. He followed behind Lord Go. Step by step, he walked toward Soul 13 in the starry sky. His aura soared rapidly with every step he took. When Bufang approached the flaming Soul 13, his aura had reached a peak. He was an Emperor Realm God, Divine Emperor Bufang. Chapter 1584. Kill him while he's down. That was what the Lord Go and Bufang were thinking at the moment. Bufang walked forward step by step, following behind the Lord Go. His aura was soaring rapidly. In a flash, his strength and cultivation base, which were only at the level of a low-grade god, surged like boiling water. All of a sudden, it soared. The power of the laws swirled around him, rolling like an ocean. Contrasting with Bufang, Bufang looked like an ancient god, the master of the sea of laws. Stepping on the waves, he came. The scene stunned everyone. It was even more shocking than the appearance of a heaven god. Bu Fang's cultivation base had risen from the level of a new god to the level of a top-grade god emperor. The speed of his breakthrough was too exaggerated and frightening, beyond everyone's imagination. In fact, no one had ever seen such a breakthrough. Becoming a god emperor with a thought? This was simply a fantasy. Or was it so easy to become a god emperor? It must be remembered that god kings were the most supreme existences in this chaos-verse, and their cultivation bases were incomparably high. They looked down on the world and controlled it. But that chef had achieved such strength with a thought. The Xiai Divine Emperor did not even care about his injuries as he jumped up from the ground. He did not expect that not only did Bu Fang survive Soul 13's attack, but his cultivation base had also broken through. He had forcibly broken through from a demigod to a god, and then from a god to a god emperor. Is this guy? Is he really human? Is it because he has comprehended the 5 supreme laws of the universe? Can he do whatever he wants now that he has comprehended the 5 supreme laws? There was awe and fanaticism in the Titan Crown Prince's eyes. He was now a fanatical follower of Bu Fang. Only he knew how talented and powerful Bu Fang was. It was normal for anything strange to happen to Bu Fang. The fact that Bu Fang could bring him out of the kingdom full of soul demons alive was enough for him to trust him wholeheartedly. The Crown Prince was struck dumb. At this moment, he felt a deep sense of defeat. Bu Fang was really a monster. Compared to Bu Fang, he was nothing. The strongest Thearka's disciple? The most talented Thearka's disciple? Everything was bullsh*t. The chef, whom she had once disdained, had now grown to the same realm as her father. Xiao Yinyu's eyes flickered and her beautiful face was filled with an excited smile. She looked at Bu Fang, her expression a little blurred. Sure enough, no matter where Bu Fang was, he would shine like a piece of gold. Imo stood rooted to the ground, her body trembling. Looking at the chef in the starry sky, who was emitting a mighty pressure at this moment, she felt that her previous behavior really made her feel ashamed. The humans were dumbfounded, but soon after, everyone started to boil. They were excited and proud. The leader of the soul demons seemed to be at a disadvantage. The humans were saved. Bu Fang's aura skyrocketed. He felt that his divine power was gathering rapidly in his dantian. It was like the god of cooking's divine power liquid drop, but compared to it, his divine power was surging like a great river. However, at his current level, Bu Fang could clearly feel how terrifying the power contained in the god of cooking's divine power liquid drop was. It was a kind of power that transcended everything. It was so heavy that it seemed to be able to crush a part of the world. Even his divine power of the great river was not as good as that divine power liquid drop. Bu Fang also understood why the artifact's spirits were so distressed when he crushed it. Bu Fang also felt that he was a little prodigal in the past. The divine power was transforming Bu Fang's body. Bu Fang could feel the surging power surging under his skin. It was as if he could blow up a star with a punch. This was the power of a divine emperor. At this moment, Bu Fang's fighting prowess had skyrocketed to a level that even he could not control. The figure of the Lord Go approached Soul 13 at high speed. Soul 13 had eaten the delicacy of snail rice noodles, which was a disaster for soul demons. Therefore, a silvery white flame burst out of Soul 13's body, burning him. Soul 13 howled miserably. His sinful power kept surging as he tried to suppress the flames and his injuries. The Lord Go approached him. He threw out a punch. Under this punch, time seemed to slow down. Soul 13 naturally felt the Lord Go's attack. The Lord Go was a heaven god, and even he did not dare to take him lightly. Therefore, he divided some of his sinful power to resist the Lord Go's punch. Bam! Soul 13 threw out a punch and collided with the Lord Go's fist. Boom! Soul 13 was knocked flying backward and smashed into a vast star, causing the whole star to shake violently. He flipped to his feet, and the insect's scales on his arm, which had collided with the Lord Go's fist, shattered. However, the insect's scale armor that fell like sand and stones were slowly recovering. The Lord Go's eyes shone like torches. The law of time behind him sank and sped toward him. Bufang strode to catch up with him. The power of law kept gathering on Bufang's Taotai arm. He threw a punch at Soul 13. Get lost! Soul 13 focused his eyes and let out a ferocious roar. He really hated this chef to the core. That bowl of river snail rice noodles had caused his body to continuously break down and collapse. If it weren't for this chef, he would have completely flattened the Xiai divine dynasty and conquered this chaotic universe. He might even have been favored by all the soul demons and set foot on the peak of the soul demon realm. But now he was like a dead dog, and had fallen into such a state. It was all because of a bowl of snail rice noodles. That thing was poisonous. However, even in his current state, he was still a soul overlord. No one who was not a heaven god could defeat him. This chef was courting death by coming here. Roar! Soul 13 roared, causing the ground of the star to crack. He threw out another punch. Then, he charged toward Bufang. Bufang's Taotai arm fell, and the roar of a Taotai burst out. Bam! The two fists collided. The star shook, and Soul 13's body sank deeper into it as if he was going to pierce through it. Hovering in midair, Bufang landed on the broken star, kicking up a cloud of dust. Shrouded in the law of time, Lord Go had turned into a human figure and was also hovering in the distance. The two of them attacked Soul 13 from the front and back. Rumble, rubble rolled down. Soul 13 climbed up from the ruins. The insect's scales on his arm, which had collided with Bufang's attack, kept shattering. Soul 13's heart was filled with shock. I can't believe this chef can unleash the power of a heaven god with the strength of a god emperor. This human must not be allowed to live. He absolutely must not be allowed to live. Soul 13 had already thought of the terrifying human genius of the soul demon world. Bufang might really grow into that kind of existence. Bufang and Lord Go exchanged a glance. They did not give Soul 13 time to breathe. Their feet stomped on the ground, causing it to collapse. They shot out in an instant. At this level, all moves and techniques were useless. A simple punch was enough to crush everything. The battle was simple and straightforward. It was just the collision of fists. Whoever could not withstand it would be blown up. Soul 13's body was burning with fire, but he was not immediately defeated by Lord Go and Bufang. He seemed to be holding on to his inner pride and kept resisting. One punch after another. The insect scales on his body kept shattering under the bombardment of Bufang and Lord Go, but after that, they quickly repaired themselves. The battle between the three was in full swing. The experts of the Xiai divine dynasty could only hear the loud noises coming from the starry sky, but they did not know what was going on. Since they did not know what was going on, they decided to continue fighting. On the human side, the amount of stinky tofu was almost used up. However, they did not admit defeat. The soul demons suppressed by the stinky tofu were no longer a threat to them, and they continued to fight crazily. They showed the indomitable will of humans in a desperate situation. Humans were a strange kind of creatures. The soul demons finally felt it this time. Even when they were in a desperate situation, they could still fight back. When the Xiai divine emperor felt that his injuries were almost healed, he rose to his feet and unleashed the aura of a god emperor. With Bufang and Lord Go holding Soul 13 back, the humans would surely win this battle. The Xiai divine emperor roared. The Xiai divine emperor roared. His golden armor shone brightly. Then, he soared into the sky and charged into the soul demon's camp. With the divine emperor joining the battle instantly became one-sided. The human side had finally gained the upper hand. Half of the planet was blown up. The whole surface of the planet was full of craters. Sol 13 lay in a crater with a radius of tens of thousands of miles. His scarlet eyes stared unwillingly at the sky. In the distance, Lord Go and Bu Fong were still standing. The law of time on Lord Go was flickering, as if it would disappear at any moment. Bu Fong, on the other hand, had his mouth open and was gasping for breath. Sol 13 was being attacked by the two of them. The insect's scales on its body were completely shattered. It was unknown how many punches it had suffered. The speed at which the insect's scales repaired could not even keep up with the speed at which they were destroyed. The pit was pitch black. Sol 13 moved. Rumble, his insect's scales were completely shattered and rolled off like idiots, leaving only debris on them. He revealed his fleshly body, which was the fleshly body of the Titan Divine Emperor. It was covered with barbaric glyph. I, Sol 13, can't lose here. I, Sol 13, am an existence who will become the master of this chaotic universe. I, Sol 13, will be recognized by the Soul God. I can't die here. Sol 13's body was trembling. The next moment, he opened his mouth wide. A bulge appeared on his neck. Sol 13's eyes looked as if they were about to burst. The bulge slowly moved upward and poured into his mouth from his neck. Blurg. He vomited. Sol 13 staggered back a step. A loud bang rang out. A black energy ball smashed to the ground. An incomparably terrible power was brewing in the black energy ball. A look of complete madness appeared on Sol 13's face. Damned human beings! Damned heaven gods! You'll soon regret what you've done. The soul overlords of the 7 great sins. How dare you look down on us like this? Sol 13 was extremely weak. The corners of his mouth were stained with juice, but the sneer on his face was as cold as ice. He took a step forward. Sol 13 soared into the sky and rushed out of the crater. Bu Fong and Lord Go narrowed their eyes and looked at Sol 13. Without the protection of his insect scales, Sol 13 was much thinner. Lord Go narrowed his eyes. The law of time around him had become much more illusory. But then, he raised his hand and slapped out. It turned into a dog paw made of energy and slapped toward Sol 13. Bam! Sol 13 raised his arm to block. With a bang, green blood splattered everywhere. Although his fleshly body was that of a human, it was no longer human through the changes. He's very weak now, Lord Go said. He could sense that the paw was about to slam into him. It's time to end this, Bu Fong said. The 5 supreme laws of the universe gathered on his Taotai arm. Then, Bu Fong appeared in front of Sol 13, as if he had teleported. Sol 13 grinned and stared fixedly at Bu Fong. The look in his eyes seemed to want to devour Bu Fong alive. Bu Fong frowned. The god of cooking's eye was activated. Buzz in Bu Fong's eye of cooking. He saw that Sol 13's body was now covered with little red dots. What's going on? He only had 3 weaknesses before, but now he's covered with them? How strange. However, Bu Fong was too lazy to think about it. The 5 supreme laws swept out and smashed his Taotai arm. Bam! Sol 13's fleshly body exploded in an instant. With a deafening rumble, the whole planet seemed to explode. You're dead. This chaotic universe will be destroyed. Sol 13 laughed cruelly. His eyes were full of resentment. Bam! The next moment, his resentful face froze. His fleshly body exploded completely, and green blood filled the sky like a blood mist. In the distance, the law of time around Lord Go dissipated and transformed back into the fat black dog. He transformed back into the form of a fat black dog. However, he was overcome with sleepiness, so he directly lay down on the ground full of ruins and slept soundly. Bu Fong glanced at Lord Go and twitched the corner of his mouth. Suddenly Bu Fong paused. He seemed to sense that something was wrong. He turned his head and looked at the place where Sol 13 had exploded. Where's Soul 13's true form? Why didn't it show up? Bufang's pupils constricted as he murmured. In the deep pit, a crack rang out. A crack immediately appeared on the pitch-black sphere. The raging power of sin poured out of it. The next moment, an explosion rang out. The orb exploded. A savage beast shrouded in the power of sin with a huge mouth broke out of its shell. There was no longer any intelligence in the beast's eyes. Instead, there was only a terrifying intent to destroy. Raising its head, the savage beast let out a bestial roar. Its terrible aura soared into the sky. It was even stronger than Soul 13's. The real Gluttony Soul Overlord had appeared. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.